Yeah. Yeah, one of them came out and looked at it. I'm just not seeing it. I was like, well, the map is right here, printed on paper, you know, that's why.
For two
Surveyed
positions.
the whole place, inspected.
The whole 3 grand.
I'm just not seeing it.
Okay.
All
Alright.
The whole 3 grand.
Yeah,
That's.
we recognized this.
They usually charge around 10% of what the
Yeah.
salary is. 10 to 15%.
So I actually,
Salaries are, DOT pays for it.
both,
Planning, they never
I was gonna do it myself,
They
they
have
have
to
check
check
the
the
source
source.
equipment and all that.
Yeah, we had all the bids,
My wife
and they were the second
Yeah,
lowest,
that's-
the first one I eliminated because they wanted
Yeah, I've never
120
seen it
days. And
anymore.
then I waited 120 days.
No, they would have seen you, didn't they?
And then they got
Oh,
the price,
nice.
so it became more expensive. But yeah,
I'm not a bus child.
usually it's right around 10 to 15% of what the salaries are. And two salaries are
I
about.
never heard from it at all, so I was
Together,
together.
almost 300,000.
So when you do these things,
No, actually, my boys, my daughter, did have a lot of things on.
3 people went through whatever process.
The wife,
I would really like to see that happen.
Oh, dang.
We usually don't put the scoring sheets in there, but I mean, that's what, we have a scoring sheet.
Oh, is it more like be involved?
Yep, sign that,
What's
pass
that?
it.
I was more thinking like be involved.
Okay, do you want to get involved in the next RFP? Absolutely.
Sure, I would like to see that go.
Okay, we can do that.
Sure, really easy.
I had no idea.
Technology these days.
It's still good. When's Bishop's last day?
I already had it, but he's still hanging around.
Oh, you just want to say hang on to him?
Told him we're not doing another proclamation or anything like that for him. so-
Yes.
He's gone.
Punch you in the chest.
He's like, where's my hat? Where's my big hat? Are we waiting for anything specific?
Not quite, just 1 second.
No worries.
Mayor,
I'm not in a rush.
whoever's over there print off a copy of the transition plan.
Keith, what are you doing over
Do you
there?
want me to print it in here?
That'd be great.
Just COVID Pete.
Oh, my wife had to wake me up to watch a bear pull my refrigerator around outside last night, so.
Your outdoor beer fridge?
Just what's attached to the backup?
See that brown one?
Yeah.
That brown one?
I don't need the resolution, I just need the plan.
Yep. Just gotta get it pulled up.
Bears don't like pesto, by the way.
Good to know.
They love the cheese and chicken, but they don't like the pesto.
I texted that the Zoom isn't working.
Bill.
Any way you can pixelate my face on there?
Richard?
Can you pixelate my face? Eric wants to know if anybody else besides me wants their face pixelated.
Excellent. Does that mean you look prettier?
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just-
Smooths all your blemishes out?
It's like, yeah, if you could do that, I've seen that done before.
That's why I sit next to Jill, because that camera attention they keep on her.
Well,
have
you
to
leave
look
your
at-
monitor up.
Well, I know, that's
You're the one put it in.
Well, I was looking at some videos the other day, and it is kind of rude that nobody can kind of see her face.
Well, then it's like when people in the audience, like waiting for us to listen to
I
when
know.
we're staring out on the screen.
Hey, you looking at me? You gonna turn yours around, Joe?
So everybody else can see it. Well, because she's gonna face this way.
Just put a brand
From the Howard Freeman.
Okay. You changed your mind at the last second?
What's that?
We don't, it's not done.
Oh, it's okay.
We're not doing.
You don't want them back too?
No, she don't care about you.
Whatever, I just was getting the ones I could reach.
You don't even have two wallets?
Yeah.
Hey. I do lose a few things.
Of all the things we were calling, you missed your mind, the motion.
Okay, Jeremy, if you're ready, we can start.
Is everybody ready?
We started already.
No. You will know by the sound of my booming voice.
And when you say, where's your code?
Oh, sure. We all set?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Good morning and welcome to the October 19th Board of Supervisors meeting.
They should be.
Mine's on.
Oh, I missed yours. Sorry, Jeremy.
Okay, we'll restart.
You haven't been here so.
Good morning and welcome to the October 19th Board of Supervisors meeting. We'll call this session into order and we'll begin by Supervisor Gogan leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you for that. We're going to go into the consent calendar after public comment. Public comment is for information on matters not appearing on this agenda or within the consent calendar. All comments are limited to 3 minutes and must pertain to matters within the jurisdiction of this board. When addressing the board, please state your name for the record and address the board as a whole through the chair. No action or discussion will be conducted on matters not listed on the agenda. However, the chair may refer the subject matter to the appropriate department for follow-up or schedule the matter on a subsequent board agenda. With that, unless there's any public comment here in the board chambers, we will go to public comment on Zoom.
Yep, we have John Brower.
Good morning, Supervisors. John Brower from Junction City. I'd like to pull item 1.7 from the consent agenda, please.
Would you care to explain any reason?
Oh, I think it's important that we take a look, that supervisors take a look at extending the expiration date of the contract. It was supposed to have started June or July of this year, but it seems like it'll be starting at some point in the future after they sign the indemnity clause. The actual work on the equity program. So the contract talks about the contractor presenting a final report, final recommendations for an equity program in November to December of the year. But seeing as how they haven't been able to get started on it when they originally planned, they're going to go, 5 months behind on starting this work. It seems like we should probably extend the expiration date of the contract by a similar amount of time so they have sufficient time to actually do the job now.
All right, Emma, is there any other public comment?
Yes, Richard Marks.
Yes, thank you, Chairman and Trinity County Supervisors. My name is Richard Marks, and I live at 110 Rideout in Samoa, California. And I'm a Regional Compliance Manager for the Construction Industry Foresight Council, which is a nonprofit organization that monitors public works projects. On August 5th, I sent a California Public Records request per Government Code 6250 to Trinity County concerning multiple violations of public contract codes. I requested an answer by August 16th. I've since actually talked to some staff and I have left messages and didn't receive any callbacks on others, and I am haven't heard back from county council at all on this, and now, I'm hoping that I don't have to take another legal step. But I'm airing my grievance with the Board of Supervisors and hoping of improving communications. And in the name of transparency and good government, I request a reply to my public records request from the County of Trinity. And I just thank you for listening, and have a great rest of your meeting, and have a good day.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay, Lisa Wright.
Good morning, Chair, Board of Supervisors, Lisa Wright, Lewiston. I mentioned this at previous meetings, and I will likely continue to mention it until there's some resolution, and that's regarding the one-year period for cannabis licenses that all the farmers last year paid for, but did not receive due to administrative challenges of the county. What I'd like to do is request that this item be agendized for discussion by the board regarding the issuance of a credit towards the 2022 license fees based on the portion of the county license that was basically not granted. We all received, under the urgency ordinance, those participants all received extension letters, not actual permits or licenses, through September 5th. And now none of those people have the licenses. So most, because the majority renew in the April timeframe, I would say 75% or so would have only received 5 months worth of valid permit. So that leaves about 7 months of credit. I think you could go through individual accounts and see how much they're really entitled to for 2020. This is not only the right thing to do, but it also would assist in this coming year for farmers due to the impacts of the fires, the lack of regular sunshine, certainly impacted by the fires as well. An early frost, which a number of farmers have lost parts of crops due to that, as well as the additional cost for CEQA as being a factor, in addition to the price dropping probably by 2/3 in the marketplace now. So I know we've always kind of seen the cannabis fund as a little pot of gold that we can pull from when we need things, but we need to kind of take a look at the hardship that the farmers are facing, in addition to the equity of actually crediting back what they were unable to get in value in terms of their license, having paid for 12 months and most receiving 5 months or even less. Thank you for your consideration. Have a good day.
Thanks for your comments.
Veronica Kelly Albies.
Hi, this is Veronica Kelly Albies, Douglas City, Hooverville, Douglas City Parks and Rec. I just wanted to take this opportunity to recognize the Planning and Building Department staff and your Department of Transportation, David Colbeck, in the midst of everything that we have going on in the county. And before we all pick up and go to our corners today in the meeting, I wanted to recognize them in their ability to, when they are able to step outside of the cannabis world and other pressing matters, to help with some other great projects that are trying to get started here in the county, helping other departments such as mine with, in districts such as mine, with getting through our CEQA matters, our projects to improve the county or the lives of the residents of Trinity County. And they are doing the best job that they can with a lot of obstacles in their way. Some days with a smile, some days with a grimace, but all with respect. And I just wanted to take a moment and tell them how much I appreciate that and how much I appreciate the jobs that you guys are doing, because I can't imagine how you guys lead daily lives and try to keep up with all of these issues, because as a resident I find it difficult. And I was thinking about that this morning as I was trying to wade through things that I got on Friday and I'm trying to figure out how to get through. So I just wanted to say well done to all of that, and I'm happy and proud to be part of this community, and I just wanted to say kudos to the staff and to the board. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments.
I have no other raised hands and no new chats. And I don't think we have any from the boardroom.
All right. With that, we can proceed into the consent calendar. These items include routine non-controversial matters and will be acted upon the board by one roll call motion. If a member of the public has any questions or comments on an item on the consent calendar, they may provide them now. A member of the board or staff may request an item be pulled and considered separately.
I would request to pull item 1.1 as I was not present at the September meetings.
All right. And I know that John Brower requested item 1.7. I'll go ahead and honor that request.
You're honoring that, correct?
I am honoring that request. Any additional items? Hearing none, we could entertain a motion.
I would move to approve the consent calendar minus items 1.1 and 1.7.
I'll second.
Motion by Supervisor Cox, second by Supervisor Frazier. Supervisor Frazier, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox? Aye. Supervisor Groves?
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan?
Aye.
Supervisor Brown?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we will go into item 1.1. Clerk of the board approve the special meeting minutes of September 22nd of 2021, September 27th of 2021, and September 30th of 2021, and the regular meeting minutes of October 5th of 2021 as submitted by the deputy clerk, no fiscal impact. Are there any questions from the board on this item? And is there any public comment on this item? Hearing none.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Motion by Supervisor Groves, second by Supervisor Gogan. Supervisor Gogan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox?
Abstaining due to absence.
Thank you. Supervisor Frazier?
Aye.
Supervisor Brown?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, and the next item is 1.7. We have an agreement with Humboldt State University, approve an agreement with Humboldt State University with the Sponsored Programs Foundation to conduct a cannabis equity assessment, no fiscal impact, $55,000 from the Cannabis Equity Grant. And the concern from John Brower was that the termination date might not be adequate. I went ahead and reached out to Dawn, who is running the program, and asked her if we could extend the date, and she responded an email that she had no problem with that. Margaret, I'm curious, do we need to do anything more formal than that? In the contract, it said it can be amended with agreement between both parties. I'm assuming that's where the date extension would come in?
Correct, it would have to come back to the board for the extension if it's not done at this time.
Okay. How would we have to do it at this time?
If you'd like to do this time, just make it as part of your motion to extend the time, and then we would confer with the other side to make sure they're agreeable. If they are, we'll execute it. If not, we will bring it back to the board.
Okay.
Yeah, the only hard date would be November 30th of 2022. That's when the entire expires, but I mean, we want to get stuff in before that, but that's the hard date from the state.
And I think that's the day we put in there.
No, we put, some earlier date, didn't we?
March.
March is what is in there, but I'm suggesting that we allow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Is anyone on the board opposed to that? All right, then the amended agreement would read November 22nd of 2022, and this will, you have to say?
Yeah, should we just leave it more open-ended so that in case there's a problem that staff can just deal with it instead of having to come back if it's different than the date that you're requesting?
Well, the date is that I'm requesting is the termination date of the grant itself from the state. The state doesn't allow the grant activities.
Right, that I understand, but we're requesting of the person working on this.
Yes.
Okay, we want it to actually go to the very end date.
It just lives as an allowance. I'm open to whatever date you see.
I would.
And pardon me, this is Susie. The grant agreement is through October 31st, 2022.
The grant agreement with the state or the one on the
For
contract?
the funding, correct. For the assessment is October 31st, 2022.
Okay. Susie, do you feel that there's an appropriate date that should be amended besides the, past the March 30th?
Yeah, I do think we can extend it. I don't think we should extend it all the way to October 31st, however. You know, that is allowable, but that is the time that we have to have the report into the state, and that wouldn't give us any time to review. So maybe towards the end of September instead, that gives us time to review, make edits before we have to send it off to the state.
Okay. So Susie said September. Is there any opposition to that recommendation? Then the agreement could read September 30th of 2022 instead of March 30th of 2022. And do I need to do anything else, Margaret?
No. Public.
Okay. Is there any public comment on this item before it comes back to the board?
I have no raised hands and no new chats.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from the board on this item?
I'll move to accept the change to September 30th and the rest as is.
All right, thank you.
I'll second.
Motion by Supervisor Groves, second by Supervisor Frazier. Supervisor Frazier, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves,
Aye.
Supervisor Cox, aye. Supervisor Gogan,
Aye.
Supervisor Brown.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we will go into reports and announcements. Item 2.1, report from department heads. Do we have any department heads in the chamber wishing to report out?
Good morning, Chairman. Ed Presley, OES Manager for the county. Liz Hamilton, Director of OES, she asked me to, she wanted to yield her time to me so I could give a short presentation, not really a presentation, but just update on some of the information that I gave last meeting for you guys. So now, as of this morning, the Monument Fire has burned 223,124 acres and is at 94% contained, and that's up from 81% that I reported last time on October 5th. There are 479 personnel still working the fire. Estimated full containment date is November 1st. The river complex has burned 199,343 acres, but that's both in Siskiyou and Trinity counties. Its containment is at 92% overall, and there's 330 personnel working on that fire. The full containment date is expected November 1st as well. Phase 1 of the household hazardous waste has been completed on the Monument Fire, and Phase 2 has been approved for debris removal going forward. And that's when the team begins to remove fire debris from the properties, hazard trees along with that. They're still in the process of scheduling this, but as everyone knows, we'll have to wait in line for other fires where prioritization matters come into effect. We still have not received confirmation that the river complex has been added to the state declaration, but it was formally, and I just want to remind this for a matter of record, it was formally requested by the letter from the director of OES, Trinity OES, to the director of Cal OES on September 8th. And that formal letter requested state and or federal help. So we've done everything that we need to do from our end. We're not sure what the holdup is, and like I said, we've been in contact with state and federal agencies almost daily. But we still have not received an actual date. People still remain hopeful at various levels, but we have not received an actual confirmation that this will happen. We're just hopeful it's going to happen soon. During the first local assistance center from September 9th through the 11th for the Monument Fire, 111 survivors attended, which was a good number. I just wanted to point out, I erroneously said that only 41 survivors had attended. I was incorrect in that, and I just wanted to correct that for the record. We did have 111 people over those 3 days. I apologize for that. The second local assistance center started on September 29th and continued through October 9th for the river complex and the monument fire. 74 survivors attended, and we were trying to lean forward and allow that for the river complex in hopes that we would receive a state declaration and a federal declaration. But like I said, we still not received that. Currently, 70 residents have registered with FEMA with $151,871.76 approved for individual assistance. That's for the monument fire. Survivors have until October 25th to register. So this is for the populace. If you haven't, please do so, and you can register by going to www.disasterassistance.gov or by calling 1-800-621-3362. The deadline to submit the right of entry forms to be included in the state removal program, the debris removal, is November 15th. Environmental Health mailed out the forms in a 37-page resource packet with phone numbers and information to all impacted property owners on September 30th. So they should have received those. If not, just please contact someone here at the county and we'll help out with that. For more information, please go to www.trinitycounty.org/recovery. And if there are any questions, I can attempt to answer them now.
Any questions from the board?
Ed, I reached out to John Driscoll yesterday, and Jeremy had also sent some information over that Christie had asked to look into. John Driscoll, for the record, is Congressman Huffman's aide in the North Coast. He's claiming that we are included because I see a shaking head over there, but for those on Zoom, that would be Christie. He's claiming that we're included because the broad definition of this. So they were going to contact Christie and get this straightened out, just so you know. The other issue is, has any type 1 cleanup started in Coffee Creek?
No, sir. No, it has not yet. They have not gotten the basically the button push saying it's okay. They are on deck. They're ready to go. DTSC is ready to go with the phase 1 cleanup. They're just waiting on the go-ahead to go ahead and do that. The Watershed Task Force is meeting this morning, and I was in contact already with Cal OES Recovery, and so they are going to be bringing these concerns once again and talking about them. But what I was told last time when the chairman, he had reached forward to Congressman Huffman's office, and we were told that we were included. But when I reached back to the state with that information, I was told that a precedent has been set by the federal government, and the precedent is that they name the fires. So they can't just name Trinity County and expect everything to be covered. They actually, because they've done it in the past, they expect them to continue with that same level of precedence. So they did name the McFarland, they did name the monument, but they did not name the river complex. And basically additional information is DTSC, who Christie has been in contact with, have not received formal go-ahead that they can do it because they're, at the same time, they're worried about their reimbursement for their staff. Our problem is the rains have started now. The snow's coming, the rains are coming, those properties are right along the creek. It's going to flow into the creek, Coffee Creek, and then it's going to flow into Trinity River. It's going to flow into Trinity Lake. Part of that will flow out to the Sacramento River. Part of that will continue to flow down the Trinity River. You're talking salmon, coho, trout, tribal effects downstream. You're talking all kinds of people that are going to be affected by this. And so that's why we continually to try to push them to give us some kind of a formal confirmation on this, which we have not received from the state or from FEMA.
Okay. Yeah, and your point, actually at this point it is too late because we are supposed to get 7 inches of rain in the next few days, so it's all going to be in the river. There's no way to stop it at this point.
Yeah.
Does Christie have something to add? She would like to.
Christy Anderson, Trinity County Environmental Health. So I just wanted to let you know that even though it was out of their scope of work, I did take the Watershed Task Force with Cal OES up to Coffee Creek and show them both the extremes of the structures right on the creek and the extremes of the structures up on higher elevation and where there was slope and erosion issues. So that task force that's meeting this morning was actually there, boots on the ground, seen everything, and has asked for all of our damage assessment information. I also sent them Siskiyou County's damage assessment information to show the cumulative impacts of what's going on up there. As Ed has mentioned, we reach out several times a day. I mean, every branch possible that we can with Cal OES, with FEMA. We are bugging them constantly. We do not know what the holdup is. Like Ed had mentioned, that specific mention of the fire is really important. So we don't know where to go from here, but we know that it's going to flow downstream, and a lot of people are in that 100-year area and the high water marks, and there's going to be issues with debris flows. There is exposed roots down trees, rocks. There's hardly anything holding a lot of this stuff back. It burned hot, it burned fast, and for that section of Coffee Creek, we are really concerned about the impacts. I also wanted to mention that I've never had a community be so involved in the debris removal, and they really want it. I think we almost have 100% of the right of entry forms for that area, and people literally mapping out their hazardous waste because they want the help. So whatever we can do to get these folks the help, that's what we're trying to do. So I just wanted to mention that. If you have any questions, please let me know. As a brief aside, I wanted to let Supervisor Frazier know that there were some issues with trees in the August complex, and for that fire specifically, they're allowing some opt-out for tree removal process, so we are working on that today to get some of those folks taken care of, but this will not be available for 2021 fires. So I also sent some information Supervisor Grove's way because there were some complaints about wanting to opt out for tree removal. You can either remove the trees yourself before the cleanup or wait on the full tree removal. There's no way to opt out for 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Ed, it's very frustrating, of course, for everybody involved, and I know it's frustrating for you, and I appreciate your hard work on this. But it does seem to be that we're caught up in some sort of weird red tape bureaucracy issue between different agencies. So hopefully Huffman's office reaches out to you today, Christy. All right, thank you.
Well, you know, and sir, the only thing I would add is as much communication as we have about environmental challenges and about all the things that are going on with the salmon, you know, the coho, with everything in the river, it seems like somebody should have stepped up at this point just to do what they normally do in these kind of situations. So we're still hopeful and we're old now. So thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any additional reporting out from department heads in the board chambers? All right, Emma, anybody on Zoom?
Are there any department heads wishing to report out via Zoom? I'm not seeing any movement.
Got a perfect week.
Well, then we'll move on to item 2, report from County Administrative Officer, Dr. Coons.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few things. This will hopefully make Keith possibly happy. We're looking into the, probably won't, but at least there'll be an answer for you. It's that tub grinder. We're still waiting on the airboard permits, but what we're trying to do is locate several sites that the community can bring their limbs and stumps and stuff to that site, and we can store it there, and then when we get the permit, we can move the tub grinder from site to site to do all that. So Solid Waste is working on those sites right now, and we'll get those out to the public as soon as we can to let them know where they can dump their stuff.
So that was we're still waiting for air quality control?
Yes.
Okay.
We have about 27 more hours left on the opening for our project specialist position for the cannabis program. Very few, if any, have turned applications in, so we're still waiting on that. It was put out to other counties, local consultants, staff, so we're waiting to see what is turned in there. And then we will be, as Kim departs, we will be promoting Lisa Lozier to interim director of planning and building while we do a recruitment for that position. And then I don't want to take Jeremy's thunder, so I'll just mention that we discussed the $3.2 million that the county will be receiving for the cannabis program, and we're laying out a budget plan for that funding. I think it's really going to benefit the county and the cultivators in assisting them through their CEQA challenges, and with our consultants that we'll be hiring. So it's the right amount of money at the right time. So it's just sometimes the stars align, and I think this is going to be very beneficial to the program. That's all I have.
All right, any questions for Dr. Coons? Oh, is there an update on the new building building planning?
They are, as we speak, moving in, right? Oh,
Yeah, I just realized I should have reported on that. Yes, it's been a slow move. The big push is going to start on Friday, and next week the crew will be in transit down to the new building, so it's looking good.
All right, thank you. We will go into item 3, report from members of Board of Supervisors. Supervisor Frazier.
Cannabis ad hoc met on, I can't remember what day it was, for the first Thursday. Yeah, it was Thursday, but I don't remember the date. We actually did cover a lot of ground, took all day, met with stakeholders after our initial meeting, and I think that overall, I think it was a fairly good outcome. Other than that, I don't think I have much to report on.
All right.
I'm good, other than that.
All right, Supervisor Gogan.
I have nothing except for an old age, TRP, TMC Science Advisory Board meeting last Thursday, I think it was, 9 to 4, and that was about it.
All right. Supervisor Cox.
I had a meeting with for Supervisor Rachel Berkey in the last week, and it was a really productive conversation. I think a lot of understanding was gained. I was able to understand more fully some of the comments that she provided to the board at the last meeting, and I appreciate the communication that is there. Also appreciated that on her initiative, she has directed her local rangers to connect with their respective supervisors and set up regular monthly meetings for communication, and then she has agreed to continue to speak with me on a quarterly basis. I feel like that's really good progress, and am heartened by what can come from those kinds of conversations in the future. November 8th is supposed to be the next District 2 Town Hall meeting, but we're going to yield that night to the Resource Advisory Committee. They have meetings that they need to hold on November 8th and 15th, and it's quite timely since our October Town Hall was on the rack. A lot of good understanding came from that, so this is an opportunity then to come and watch these meetings where applications have been submitted for projects and we can see that process. So it will be here in the board meeting room on the 8th, and I believe that time frame is 4 to 7:30, and then again on the 15th. And then the last thing would be that efforts with the PSA2 are still moving forward to provide interim, well, I say interim, there's no termination date on that, for mills to kind of take the place of what the Golden Age Center used to be able to do, and we believe will one day do again. But those are some really good efforts, and people have really stepped up to fill in the components that were needed to make that happen. So that's the end of my report.
Supervisor Groves.
Yeah, Liam missed one thing. We also had a TMC call, our monthly meeting call, which nothing terribly exciting happening there. The ad hoc, I want to go in a little more depth than Dan. I appreciate Dan's hard work in this. And so Just so people understand the schedules, we are going to meet on Thursdays as an ad hoc. That ad hoc, as at this point, is Dan and I, Richard, Margaret, and Kim. Our first meeting was basically just to kind of set up how logistically we're going to do things. But we did get a lot of productivity done and caught up to speed in how this process is going to move forward. After that, I've set up that we will meet with stakeholders in the afternoon. So our meetings are at 11 is the ad hoc, and then we meet with stakeholders in the new building. We met our first big conference. I hope there's a heater in there because it was pretty cold. We couldn't figure out how to turn that on, but and then after stakeholder meetings, we are available and open to private groups that want to meet. As yesterday, I reached out also to TAA as a stakeholder group and have invited them into that. Any interested party that wants to, out of an organization wants to come and take part, we're willing to consider. The first stakeholder meeting was very productive. We caught them up. I think these are going to be important in the fact that we can be a conduit between people that are working hard and don't have time in their busy days to work through this process, and as we go into more consulting to listen to concerns and what's happening on the ground and to give people a heads up on what's happening. And so, for example, Ms. Wright's complaint about the money is an issue that we will take back and discuss as the ad hoc and the county as a whole. The other issue is in the past when we had ad hocs, we put those on the agenda so we don't just forget what's going on there. So in the future, if we could do that, if the staff and chair are willing. And then on Friday, I had NCRP, which is, we went from live back to Zoom. The highlight there was Senator McGuire came and gave a state of the state blurb, or state of the North State. And as you can imagine, once he got rolling, he ate up most of the meeting, which was good. And I will, Jeremy was also in attendance in that meeting. I'll let him talk about his side of it. But it's a large group, but both me and Jeremy got in there and got questions, and I hit him on fires and Jeremy hit him on cannabis. So most people didn't get a chance to answer questions, so we tag teamed pretty hard there and got our share of the time. So Senator McGuire is going to get back to me and work on forest fire and trying to coordinate better with the Forest Service and trying to get them to be more aggressive and do a better job in keeping fires under 250,000 acres. With that, that's my report.
I have a question for Supervisor Gross, if I could. You mentioned that the ad hoc meets at 11, and I missed what time you said the stakeholders venue participate.
We're at this point, in a lot of this as we set up is a little bit in flux, but at this point we're doing that at 2, and then hopefully those meetings will be like 2 to 3, and then after 3 we will meet individually with groups that don't want to meet as, or for example, we had stakeholders that met as a group but then had private questions that they wanted to ask. So that's our schedule now. It makes for a very long Thursday, and I really appreciate Dan's commitment to come up here and spend his day in Weirville. That's where we're at.
All right, thank you for that report out. For myself, as Keith noted, with the NRCS meeting on Friday, one of the big takeaways was an approved application for, I think, all of the county partners with NRCS, which goes down to Sonoma and up to Del Norte, I believe Siskiyou County. And they got approval for this big LiDAR survey with USGS. And so we didn't really go into too many of the details of how the specifics they're going to use the LiDAR, but it's essentially going to be a bunch of data for all the counties and organizations and tribes to utilize when determining forest density and the most compromised areas for fire and surrounding communities and things like that. So that was something that a lot of the team there have been working a while on, and they're pretty happy with that grant being awarded. Let's see, Frontier phone service continues to be less than adequate. They are billing customers in the downriver area that are not receiving service after they told me they would not be billing customers. So I've worked with McGuire's office and Frontier's office to try to make sure that they are going to stop billing customers, or that they will compensate customers that were billed for getting nothing. They're also slowly getting the line extended, but I think it is pretty dismal as far as how they do it. I don't see any helicopters, so I think someone actually walks up the hill and uncoils phone line across the hillside. This is essentially a temporary Band-Aid for them. They have, in other states across the country, they have gone bankrupt, and they have, I think, some issues as far as showing up and grabbing a quick business for a couple of years and then leaving. So we'll keep an eye on that, and hopefully it doesn't get any worse. Caltrans and the 299, I spoke with Dave Moore about the anticipated timing on our new French Creek slide. It's not actually the French Creek slide, but it looks very similar. It's expected to go to mid-January if we receive decent weather. And this is looking like it's going to be a extra wet weather. So I expect this to go to next January, personally, and at least into summer. And that's going to be challenging. I will say it is not the most organized traffic stop on the highway, and I will make an effort to talk with Dave Moore about ways that they could improve the safety, because you have no way of knowing how many cars are actually going to be waiting at these traffic stops at 7 a.m. and 8:30 a.m. And sometimes they're right there at the traffic stop, and sometimes they're pushed a mile out. And so it's really hard for also the work crews to know where to put their flaggers and where to put the rumble strips and things like that. So we'll keep an eye on that. And the Sugar Bee, the Christmas tree, I think, has been named Sugar Bee. Sugar Bear is getting cut down on Sunday, this Sunday. So on Saturday there is a tour for interested supervisors and other, forest affiliates to go look at the tree on Saturday. I plan on doing that, and I guess the logistics with the highway and the road and the size of the tree made it not feasible to come into Weaverville, which is kind of disappointing, I will say. But there is a tree event in Willow Creek on the 30th. I'll be attending that and doing a little speaking thing there. So if anyone wants to come down to Willow Creek and meet the Willow Creek community, I've been part of that community for a long time, and it is interesting, kind of the two different communities coming together, or still remaining separate, but trying to get them a little closer together. That's on the 30th, and then on November 3rd, the tree is going to be in Sacramento. I'm going to go down there with the tree also and have some meeting time, hopefully, with Senator McGuire. That's mostly about it. I also had a good meeting with NRCS, and I've requested NRCS to come do a presentation to the board to kind of outline the services that they have been providing to the county over the past few years, how much participation the county and private landowners have taken with that program, and also kind of some of the areas where there's opportunity for more private landowners to take on these programs. And there was more programs that I was aware of with NRCS, beyond the EQUIP program. But there's a lot of stuff out there for forest health and post-fire damage grant assistance stuff. And so I thought it'd be nice to get a presentation. That'll probably be in a month or something. And unless anyone has any questions for me, that concludes my report. Okay, we'll go into county matters. These items include non-routine or controversial matters and are listed alphabetically by department. A member of the board, staff, and public may request that an item be heard out of order. I'm going to move item 3.2 to the end of the board meeting before closed session. Are there any other requests for the for the county matters? Seeing none, we will go into human resources. Item 3.1, modify the department allocation list for Health and Human Services, Public Health Division to read 2 senior financial officers or business manager or administrative service officer effective October 19th, 2021. No impact to the general fund. Approximate cost and salary benefits per month for an administrative service officer at A-step is $8,496. For business manager is $8,723. And for a senior financial analyst is $9,970.
Good morning, Shelley Nelson, HR Director. Health and Human Services, the Public Health Branch, has requested approval to modify their department allocation listing. And they wanted to modify the category Senior Financial Officer or Business Manager or Administrative Services Officer classification by increasing their allocations from 1 to 2. They'd like to expand the supervisor to staff ratio within the unit by allowing an administrative service officer position to supervise the administrative staff. They do have sufficient funding within their budget to cover this, and there is no impact to the fiscal. There's no fiscal impact to the general fund.
Any questions from the board? Seeing none? Oh, is that a question? No, okay. Is there any public comment on this item?
S. Waters has a hand raised.
Sandra, I believe that's you. You there, Sandra?
I am. Oh, there
Can
we
you
go.
hear me?
Yep.
Sandra, just so you're aware that this public comment would be for the item we just announced. I don't know if you're making public comment.
Right, yeah, okay, so that's not what my question was about.
Okay.
Thank you.
I believe you want to make public comment on Burnt Ranch matters, and that would have happened at the very beginning of the board meeting.
Oh, well, I couldn't, all right, so I'll try again later.
I'm sorry, I'll reach out to you. And
Thank you.
Okay, I have no other raised hands and no new chats.
Okay. I'll move to approve item 3.1 as presented.
I'll second.
Motion by Supervisor Brown, second by Supervisor Gogan. Supervisor Gogan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chairman Brown?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox? Aye. And Supervisor Frazier?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Alright. Next, we go to Sheriff, item 3.3. Approve a budget adjustment for fiscal year 2021 for Cannabis Eradication Program, Department 2280, increasing interfund expenses by $2,311 and transfers in by $2,311. Approve a budget adjustment for fiscal year 2021 for General Fund Contingency, Department 9901, decreasing appropriations by $2,311, and approve a budget adjustment for fiscal year 2021 for contributions to others, Department 1990, increasing transfers out by $2,311. Decreasing contingency funds in the amount of $2,311. Current balance in fiscal year 2021. Contingency is $87,847. And current cash balance in Cannabis Eradication Program Fund 148 is $22,710. Is someone speaking to this item? Are there any questions from the board? Is there any public comment on this item?
I have no raised hands and no new chats.
All right. Oh,
Good morning, Tim Saxon, Sheriff's Office. Real quickly, this is to cover indirect costs that are not covered by the grant itself. So that's what this item is for.
all right. Thank you, Sheriff. Entertain a motion on this item.
I'll move to accept 3.3 as presented.
I'll second.
All right.
Motion by Supervisor Groves, second by Supervisor Frazier. Supervisor Frazier, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves,
Aye.
Supervisor Cox,
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan,
Aye.
Chairman Brown.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Item 3.4, approve a budget adjustment for fiscal year 2021 for the Jail Health Department, Department 2301, increasing services and supplies by $25,000, and approve a budget adjustment for fiscal year 2021 for Contingency Department 9901, decreasing appropriations by $25,000, increase in general fund appropriations to the amount of $25,000. Current fiscal year 2021 contingency balance is $85,536, parentheses, after previous budget adjustments. Any questions from the board? Any public comment on this item?
I have no raised hands and no new chats.
And Sheriff Saxon, do you have anything additional you'd like to add to this?
Just to point out that every year we try and budget for what our healthcare costs are going to be within the jail. Some years we're adequate and we can estimate what it is we're going to be expending on healthcare costs for our inmate population. This year those costs were higher than we anticipated. We do our best to negotiate with our healthcare providers to lower those costs. We do our best on that. This year our costs were higher than we anticipated, higher than we were able to negotiate.
All right, thank you, Sheriff. Are there any additional questions? Hearing none, entertain a motion.
I'll move to accept item 3.4 as presented.
I'll second.
Motion by Supervisor Frazier, second by Supervisor Gogan. Supervisor Gogan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier,
Aye.
Supervisor Groves,
Aye.
Supervisor Cox,
Aye.
Chairman Brown.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Before we go into planning and zoning, item 3.2, the much anticipated transition plan, we are going to take a 10-minute break and we'll come back to the meeting at around 10:10, it might be 10:15. Bear with us and thank you.
Is that okay when you cut here? Yes, okay, it's going to be a long one. That's on me.
Evan, could you print those out for me also?
The emails?
Yeah, not just the first one under comments.
Okay, I can do that.
I just have a hard time reading these things. Yeah, I did
I was just looking at the winter weather advisory for Weaverville.
I saw that.
Popped up on my phone.
Oh, really?
6 inches.
Yeah, something happened there?
I see that.
It says wet though, that's not the funnest for skiing.
No, it's not. Desperate times call for desperate measures.
You guys didn't, did you should be able to see snow from the Alps? I can see them coming in.
Yeah, that's sounded rude.
Just on the other side of Weaver Ball, it's dusted.
We're in the
I'm at
afternoon.
2,600 feet, so I can't see all the way to the Alps unless I climb the hill a little bit.
Yeah, I know that I got some sleep in my place the other night, but
Right?
Grizzly Mountain's white.
She has his eyebrows.
Peak white.
No,
Yeah, it's raining from today until November.
Oh my
What my
god.
weather
That is
shows.
hilarious. I go over and eat lunch with her on Monday and stuff. Ethan doesn't want them
Yeah,
Monday,
that's
so
over
I
here.
just go hang out with
This is the only place
her.
that counts, okay?
So you're not positive.
No,
Most
not really.
expensive eyebrows.
Oh, just 30%.
Do you want a better chair? Yeah, you need a better chair. We have too many broken. You get a Richards. You want this one?
Oh, he'll be out here soon enough.
I was giving away your chair.
I'm sure. Do you like the ones without?
I'm gonna try that. Oh, I don't.
Okay. Okay, perfect. No worries. I just wanted to make sure.
I am so ready to do this. This is great.
All right, are you ready?
Yeah, you guys all set?
Oh, yeah.
Captain Kirk says, like this can.
All right. Welcome back. We are in County Matters, and we are going to our last item in County Matters, Planning and Zoning, item 3.2, receive a presentation, discuss, and adopt a resolution approving the draft transition plan for the commercial cannabis program, unknown fiscal impact. And I'll pass the floor down that way.
Hello.
Yes, right. Make sure it's, yep, it's still
We've got
morning.
Slides.
Oh, yeah, we're,
Stuff, huh?
yeah, nice and
I
colorful.
like the color pick.
too.
Good morning, Kim Hunter, Director of Building and Planning, along with David Kolbeck. David, what's your title now?
Environmental Compliance Specialist 2, Interim Deputy Director of Department of Transportation, and essentially a consultant to the cannabis program.
It's very lengthy, thought it best come from him. Okay.
Did you say that again?
It's in the record.
I am very excited to have the transition plan before you today. I think many of us are. First of all, before I get into the PowerPoint and do a brief overview, I want to say that this is, what's being presented today, I anticipate changes today and in the future. This is a starting point. It is, there will be times when more clarification is needed as we get farther along into the process. There will be things that come up that need to be addressed. It was wonderful to sit down with the ad hoc last Thursday and have somebody to bounce ideas off of. Thank you, Supervisor Groves and Supervisor Frazier. Very helpful to have be able to have a discussion and discuss policy matters. So that was very helpful. And so I suspect there's going to be more, not suspect, I know there's going to be more that needs to happen with this plan. Today, again, it's a starting point, and it is will be approved by a resolution, I hope, adopted today by resolution. Resolutions have a bit more flexibility than, say, an ordinance, in where we can come back and amend a resolution, and we expect that. So just getting started, make sure everybody's clear on that. It's also my understanding some comments arrived during the meeting regarding this plan. Obviously, staff does not have time to read those comments while we're in the meeting. They will be carefully reviewed after the meeting, and if there's any, that will be obviously a group effort with county council and our CEQA legal counsel. If there's items that need to be amended, again, that will happen at a later time. We cannot receive comments during a meeting and be able to respond to those when they're received at the 11:59th hour.
Just for my knowledge, is there a cutoff time from, like we start at 9, do we not receive any letters to the?
Typically, items received the morning of the agenda don't get forwarded on until after, or the morning of the board meeting, because of time constraints. Items received are always forwarded on to the board and relevant staff,
At the time received?
except for the morning of the board meeting.
Right. Oh, we got that. This is a one-off.
Yes, there was time to do it today.
All right. I just didn't know if there was in the future, because it is somewhat of a distraction, no matter what we're talking about. Especially in this situation.
Okay, with that, I'll get started. You ready for that first one? The goal of the transition plan is to create a guide that outlines the discretionary review process in order to obtain a site-specific CEQA determination. The process must be transparent, fair, and efficient. While I go through this PowerPoint, I just wanted to point out some references. The Appendix C checklist, I'll be referring to as the checklist with a capital C. Commercial Cannabis Program EIR, the PEIR. Lead agency would be Trinity County in light of CEQA. And responsible agencies, there could be more in some cases, but generally that's the State Water Board, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the Department of Cannabis Control. Next. You got a good feel for this. The transition plan begins, of course, with an introduction. The introduction provides an overview of the streamlining process and the importance of that process. The Commercial Cannabis Program, PEIR, has fully analyzed all the impacts of licensed cannabis activities. The CEQA guidelines encourage lead agencies to use tiering when appropriate. Permitted cannabis activities are considered to be a subsequent activity now that we have the PEIR in place and certified for our commercial cannabis program. The scope of the transition plan addresses 4 streamlining strategies. First, approval of an activity covered by a prior CEQA document, in this case, the programmatic EIR, or in some cases there might be an approved and adopted determination of a negative declaration. We have about 5 of those in the county currently. 2, tiering from the PEIR. 3, approving site-specific activities using the checklist. And 4, approving site-specific modifications using the checklist. And that brings me to basically what I started out the presentation with. Modifications are expected to this plan. It's meant to be iterative in nature with frequent review and modifications when necessary, to provide additional guidance and clarification. Section 1, license approval with a checklist. The checklist and the compliance determination will tier off the PEIR and are considered to be an addendum to the certified PEIR. The inclusion of a mitigation measure in the commercial cannabis ordinance, which is ordinance number 315-849, protects environmental resources and simplifies the preparation of the checklist. The checklist enables applicants to identify the appropriate mitigations for their site conditions. So I want to go over that in a little bit more detail so everybody understands the process clearly. We have the programmatic EIR that lists mitigations, a number of them. Not all mitigations are going to apply to all sites, and those mitigations will be applied in different ways, meaning some are immediate. They can be implemented immediately and should be in process now if possible. Others are ongoing, and then there's some that will take time to implement, mattering on the site and what that mitigation is. The checklist also evaluates categories in terms of changed conditions that may result in potentially significant environmental impacts. One question we've gotten very often from licensees in the program and consultants is, when can we make changes to the program? When's the best time? And for several months, especially in 2020, there was recommendations from staff, do not make any changes at all. To the point where we did create a form, acknowledging that site conditions had been maintained. And that comes back to the baseline conditions of when that time period started for the CEQA analysis. Now, as we've gotten farther into the program and with the programmatic EIR, there is a time for changes to be made to the site. So there's two routes folks can go, our licensees can go with the Appendix C checklist. That is to just keep it simple, analyze the existing conditions, and get a compliance determination for what is existing at this point. The other is to anticipate the changes that a licensee will want to make in the future and include those in the analysis. It can go either way. It's absolutely at this point up to the applicant. Now, if there are future improvements that they would like to make, and then in those cases, that's a fine line to walk. You want to make sure those are feasible improvements and they can happen, because your environmental analysis is going to be more complex, and there'll be possibly more mitigations applying to those improvements over time. So it's a fine line not to go too big, but to go big enough, so to speak, and make sure you are covering what is feasible. Now later on, down the road, if someone does want to make changes, they go back to the checklist, and we'll cover that a little bit more later on. Similar in format to Appendix G of the CEQA guidelines, which is your typical initial study checklist. The checklist, our Appendix C checklist, is tailored to our EIR and the ordinance. Use of the checklist provides a simplified CEQA process for subsequent or later activities, which I just mentioned. And once the process is complete, a compliance determination will be issued. This will be in the form of a memo to the file, and also will be, it will be signed as well. Section 2 still, actually we're moving on to Section 2. I thought there was one more in there. Thank you. Yes, I just added that this morning. Wow. wow, this site got a little messed up somehow. So that first right under categorical exemptions, I apologize for that. Licensed sites have been previously issued, not is sued, issued. A CE must be completed with the checklist. However, based on the review of the checklist, some categorical exemptions may remain in place. There's some sites I visited that there's been no changes, and they've been issued a CE, and that would definitely still apply. There's been no change to the site, a very small, less impactful activities. So there are some that it's possible. Most likely, most will not remain CEs, but that is an option. Moving forward, CEs will no longer be issued for new licenses, but those that were issued prior may still apply, as long as there's not been any changes to the site. And then there's 6 exceptions listed in the California Code of Regulations section 15300.2 that lists where categorical exemptions cannot apply. So if there's no change to the site and those exceptions do not apply to the activity, that CE may still be valid and will be honored. Continuing on in section 2, the checklist processing. Checklists will be processed based on the established prioritization. Once the transition plan is adopted, checklists may be submitted for all license types, but they will still be processed according to the prioritization. We will accept them, but those that have been received that are lower down in the prioritization will just be on hold until they come up for review. Checklists may be submitted electronically with the submittal cover sheet to info.cannabis@trinitycounty.org. Due to the volume of information in these Appendix Cs, we're highly encouraging that checklists be submitted electronically. Even some of them are too big. We work with folks if the document is too large to send via email. But there is a cover sheet, a submittal cover sheet with information, contact information, and then of course the Appendix C checklist. So again, I just want to re-emphasize to those listening in, please submit electronically if you're able to. It makes life easier for everybody and less trees are killed. Okay, so the prioritization, there is some wording that definitely we need to review, and I suggest being changed in the prioritization. I'll mention that when we get to that. So the first level, or not level, but phase of applications being renewed, we've mentioned this before, is the active applications that received urgency ordinance extension letters or were active throughout that period. We actually came across one license that was issued in November of last year and still had not expired and was never issued a urgency letter because of the timing of that year for that license. So there are some that didn't receive urgency ordinance letters that are still active. So that's the active in good standing application renewals. Those will be the first. There is, we've quoted the number of 308. However, 5 of those are licenses that, 5 of those are still those licenses that received negative declarations approved by the Planning Commission. So we're probably around 300 on those. The second phase is pre-2021 pending applications. There's several applications. We estimate around 108, 110 that are new licenses, never issued, but many of those were very far along the process. Some were even noticed with licenses printed that were not issued due to questions about issuing further provisional licenses. So there was a hold put on issuing those licenses at that time. Those are in the next group. Those will be prioritized based on the license number to make sure we're getting to the first group. in that phase 2, those who've been waiting the longest. So that will be based on license number while we go through that group. Bumping back up to the phase 1, active application renewals, we will be processing and reviewing those as they come in. However, reserve the right to focus on watershed areas and license numbers as well with the phase 1 group. Okay, I'm going to skip down to the 3. That's the one where the language is a little bit confusing. There should be, so phase 3 is inactive previously issued CCL renewals. I don't know why that's confusing. I think it's number 4 that's confusing. I'll have to grab my plan real quick. For the phase 3 inactive previously issued CCL renewals, those will be prioritized. Thank you. Those will be reviewed in order of receipt and CCL number. So that when they're submitted and the CCL number will both be considered within the prioritization. And then the 4th phase is the 2021 licenses. And so I don't know why I got confused about that language. We can cover that later if there's questions. So the 4th phase is the new 2021 applications. Thanks, David. There's 80 new licenses that have come in. And so those will be the last of those reviewed. And they're the newest that have been submitted. And so that's the 4th phase. This is a very, very simple process breakdown. Once we get a checklist in, staff will review it just for completeness. We don't want to send something to the consultants that's missing items. So that's just a very simple completeness review, not looking at content or quality of that content or looking into CEQA. Just, do we have everything we need to send this to the consultant?
So we're talking about the Appendix C checklist.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah. Appendix C checklist process once we get this in the door.
This is the 300.
This will be all of them once they come in the door, based on the phasing. I mean, so when they come in, before we send them to the consultant, we'll check them for completeness. So this will be applied to all 4 phases. At this point, this is what's proposed. So a general checklist completeness is review is completed by staff. Complete checklist will be sent to the consultants for comprehensive review and order prioritization. So we will be going through them as soon as they come in. They'll be sent to the consultant. It's up to the consultant to go through those based on the prioritization that we have provided them. And then once the review is complete, they'll be recommended for a compliance determination. That compliance determination, along with the license, will be notified. Notification will be provided. And then after that process, I'll go into the notification process a little bit more in a few slides. Once the license must go with the compliance determination. That is key. And they'd be notified together. There is a chance to appeal, very similar to the notification process we've been using now. That's 10 days from the date of publication in the Trinity Journal. Also, notifications will be sent out to adjacent landowners as well, within 300 feet. That's in accordance with state law. And there is a chance to appeal that. Should no appeal be received, then the compliance determination and license will be forwarded to the chairman of the Board of Supervisors for signature.
And that's both for Appendix C applications and
the licenses.
And the license.
Mm-hmm. since the determination is on the license, it's very important they go together. And that saves notification for the Appendix C and the license separately. It's a streamlined process.
But the 300 have already gone through that process.
The 300 have gone through that process, but they haven't been issued renewals.
Okay.
So when the compliance determination is issued, the license renewal will be issued as well. So it still has a license accompanying the completeness determination.
So Kim, in this part of it here, does the landowner 300-foot mark or any landowner, do they have the chance to file a complaint prior to the issuance of a license or only after? And
They can always file a complaint. Filing an appeal would happen after the date of approval. So we put the notice in the paper and we notice 10 days ahead of time before the approval. We send out the notices to the adjacent landowners, so 10 days pass. Want to make sure people have enough time to recognize, to get the letters and recognize that this is pending. And then on the 10th day, it's approved. And then after the approval, there's 10 working days it can be appealed.
And those 10 days for appeal require $500, correct?
Correct.
it is $500 still?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, and this is an area where I will be looking to David to provide any further information or comments on cumulative impacts. And this has been a concern all along. The cumulative impacts from grows that have higher density concentrations in certain areas. So density considerations. This is still in section 2, checklist processing. The checklist currently only lists cumulatively considerable impacts under the air quality, hydrology, and water quality sections and mandatory findings of significance sections. I'm having a real hard time with that today. Cumulatively considerable means that the incremental effects of a project are considerable when viewed in connection with the effects of past projects, the effects of other current projects, and the effects of probable and future projects. Section 5 provides additional information on how to address those cumulative impacts.
Let's go back there for a second, because this is the elephant in the room, obviously, or in my view anyway. So, do cumulative impacts take into consideration illegal projects?
Okay, apparently I'm getting the nod.
Yes.
So I would say no. CEQA does not cover illegal activities. And so because this is a CEQA process to get to a compliance determination, addressing illegal activities is not appropriate. So they would not be considered within the cumulatively considerable impacts.
Okay. And at what point, so after the last slide, if we look at, I guess it would fall under the air qualities for odor issues. The only way for the neighbors to have input in this is at the appeal process.
The way it's currently proposed, correct.
Yeah. I guess that was easier than I thought it was going to be.
Any other questions?
We'd like to answer questions on that further as needed, but continue.
I'll get through this and then continue. continue our discussion. So license numbering, I did want to point this out because our license numbering, there's been a little bit of confusion on why we have more than 530 license numbers, and there's several reasons for that. Not a big issue, I just want everybody to be on the same page. Our license numbering, we're actually up to about the mid 700s now, and that is because there have been withdrawn licenses, inactive licenses, and transferred licenses. We just keep going in sequential order rather than keeping licenses at 530. Another reason is because earlier in the program, when non-cultivation cannabis activity came in as licenses, those were also assigned CCL numbers. Now the CCL number is Cannabis Cultivation License, that's what CCL stands for. So we are trying to separate those licenses out, such as distribution, non-storefront retail, manufacturing, and distribution. We're separating those out into different license numbers now because it's very confusing. So that also skewed the numbers. Licenses that have transferred to a new owner on an existing license site, if there's a completed Appendix C document done, and there's no changes made to the site, then they're good to go. The checklist goes with the site, not the person, just like any CEQA determination. It goes with the site, not the person. So in that case, there's no change except in ownership. Licenses that transfer to a new site must complete a new checklist prior to site development. Obviously, that's a different site, different mitigations are going to apply. There's different environmental resources present, so that would require a new checklist. Also, during the process, checklists may be referred to responsible agencies during processing and review. Lots of times the Water Board and especially Fish and Wildlife, not so much the Water Board, but Fish and Wildlife and Department of Cannabis Control, they are boots on the ground. They see so many more sites than our staff. We have currently 2 compliance specialists, and we work very closely with those agencies. So there might be something, especially in the case of Department of Fish and Wildlife, that they're aware of that we're not. So we do want to have that opportunity to work with those responsible agencies. Also, keep in mind that once we have compliance determinations for these sites, those agencies will be tearing off those CEQA documents as well. Department of Cannabis Control, Fish and Wildlife, and Water Board all depend on the county's CEQA determination. So it's very important that we have a good communication with them through the process. In some cases, we're moving on to section 3, mitigation implementation. In some cases, a mitigation plan may be required for certain mitigations that require implementation over time and should be included with the checklist if needed. In a mitigated negative declaration document, that's usually called a MMRP, Mitigation and Monitoring Reporting Program, when you have mitigations that need to be implemented. In this case, it's just a simple mitigation plan. You identify what applies to you, how it's applied, and how it can be implemented. And those that are going to take a little bit longer, there needs to be a plan on how that's going to occur and the timeline. There is something called deferred mitigation, which is the next bullet point on the PowerPoint. And again, I'm going to look to David to add any comments on deferred mitigation. Sometimes it's a little bit unclear what is deferred mitigation. But mitigation measures basically cannot be deferred to a future date. They have to be in process. Anything to add on that?
That's correct, and I would also add to that, that the mitigation or the plan to implement mitigation can't be vague. It has to be very specific in terms of how you're actually going to get there. You can't have, we can't receive plans that say, we will determine this in the future. No, we need to know what they're doing, when they're doing it, and how they're doing it. What benchmarks they will reach by what time. So the more robust a plan that we receive for mitigation that has to be applied in the future or throughout the future, the better position we will be in. An example is roads. If you have a road that is a complicated road system that may require quite a lot of money to fix, as has been discussed previously in this board meeting today, there are some grant funds that we're looking to help with that process and a number of other grant opportunities that exist. However, if you have a road, it may be infeasible to spend the money or the design or the plans that are necessary to implement it immediately. So what we're requesting is a plan to implement that road improvement for, say, over a 5-year period. The first year I'll do this, the second year I'll do that. By year 5, the mitigation will be complete. And the county's responsibility for our MMRP, Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Program that Kim just mentioned, our responsibilities at that point would be complete when that plan is finalized.
What kind of ability are we going to have to make sure that that 5-phase project happens timely and fully?
That plan will have to become part of the file. So for an individual operation, for its license, that plan over time will have to be part of their file. Then there will have to be a means to check in on those specific benchmarks. That is a staffing consideration I can leave to the future. I envision that it would be a role or responsibility of our compliance specialists to incorporate the review and the progress of any specific mitigation plan to the current site inspection schedules that they currently have.
And I would recommend that the mitigation plan is actually attached to the compliance determination if one exists. So they kept together and that compliance determination is based on that mitigation plan.
And without completion of the mitigation, you lose your license.
Correct?
Fair.
Yep, and that is stated. Revocation can occur if no progress is made and the benchmarks are not made that are included in that mitigation plan. The checklist must permit applicants to apply the PEIR mitigations to site through the development of plans outlining site-specific performance standards and implementation benchmarks for those mitigation measures that will be implemented over time. License revocation may occur due to the failure to implement a mitigation measure. And that is simply based on not being in compliance with CEQA and the ordinance 315849. Section 4 covers later, in parentheses, subsequent activities. Subsequent later activities, like changes to the site that may occur in the commercial cannabis program must be examined in the light of the PEIR to determine whether an additional environmental document must be prepared. If a later activity is occurring at a site that has already received a compliance determination and that activity is addressed in the PEIR, then a new checklist must be submitted that specifically addresses that new activity. There are 2 questions that need to be answered in this process, and that is, first, is the activity consistent with the program, project, or plan that the PEIR certified? And secondly, does it incorporate feasible mitigation measures and alternatives developed in the program EIR? Anything to add on that?
I would just add briefly that the idea is that we recognize that these are agricultural operations, that they need to change over time. They need to be able to adapt either to the full build out of a licensed square footage, for example, or the relocation of certain facilities to a more optimal location. So while we have to be very conscious of CEQA terms like piecemealing, where you can't keep going back and modifying and modifying and modifying your CEQA document, there are opportunities under CEQA law to amend an existing document. So this is simply meant to be, there is some avenue for the idea to optimize a site, but that is a limited route to take, but it is available when necessary. It involves the same checklist and process with CEQA compliance in mind the entire time.
So on 4.1, Kim, David, for sites that are already received compliance determination, if a later activity has effects that were examined by the PEIR, the applicants must or may prepare another checklist for the site.
If the activity is consistent with the program, the PEIR, and they make a change that wasn't included in their original checklist, they must.
Maybe I don't have the updated version, but mine says may.
Okay, we'll change that.
If I'm at,
No, it's a must.
okay.
Thank you for catching that.
I apologize, I'm seeing in item 4.1 the word must.
Are you? So I don't know.
It must prepare.
And you got may?
No, I have must.
I haven't looked at what I have.
Okay. All right, fair enough. Maybe
But we will make sure that gets changed.
That's a good clarification, I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Would you mind going over this slide?
What is this slide?
This is the later subsequent activities and different types of documents.
And this is speaking to ordinance amendments?
This is speaking to all types of activities regarding subsequent EIRs, negative declarations, supplemental to the EIR.
Okay, so my understanding of this particular slide, subsequent EIR would be in reference to any potential ordinance changes that the board wishes to make in the future. Not at this time, that is not being proposed at this time. But there has been a lot of discussions over the past years about how to improve the ordinance in a number of different ways. Just so that the board recognizes that the programmatic EIR that we currently have in place only covers the existing ordinance as it is written. So if changes were to be made to that ordinance, that would then potentially trigger CEQA again. The benefit is that because we have a programmatic EIR, if you wish to make a minor change that has no environmental impact, that would simply become an addendum to the existing EIR. It's a public process, but essentially a letter to the file. However, if you wish to make changes to the ordinance that are more significant, that may have an environmental impact, that would require a supplemental EIR. So apologies for jumping around this slide a little bit. I believe that is the intent. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I totally put him on the spot there.
So, but to just add to, when we wrote the programmatic EIR, we explained that to the board in the Planning Commission a number of times, that the EIR was not making drastic changes, only addressing the environmental impacts as the ordinance was written, and we fully understood that changes would need to occur in the future.
Would a supplemental EIR be as cumbersome as the original?
Thank you for saying that. No, the intent again is that the programmatic EIR as written is meant to be essentially the basis. It's the biggest hurdle. Any subsequent EIR can tier off of that programmatic EIR and only analyze and address those environmental impacts that are specific to that ordinance amendment. So if you wish to have multi-year licenses, for example, just one example among many and many examples, you only have to deal with the programmatic EIR where small changes need to be made. So it's meant to be an easier route.
So David, as I hear this is kind of a living document that can be adapted to. Me and Keith probably hear this the most, adaptive management in the fishing world with restoration. So it seems to me to be that way, that this is a living document that we can, as things change, adapt to.
Absolutely, at the discretion of the board in which route you wish to go, yes.
Thank you.
I'd say our programmatic EIR is that cornerstone to the foundation, and it can be built upon. So that big stone is now in place and ready for further improvements or changes, so to speak. Maybe that's not the greatest analogy, but it's what you got for me today. Okay. I think we're done with the slide. Thanks. So section 5 and 6. Section 5 includes the list of the mitigation measures, and section 6 is definitions followed by footnotes. I think as we come to the conclusion of this PowerPoint. Thank you for your patience and excellent questions. I expect more questions and discussion, and looking forward to any direction you can provide. Thank you.
Alright, so section 5, you just have the list of things that have to be mitigated, but you don't have a list of how to mitigate those.
No, that's up to that's an area definitely we could look at further supporting information in the future. It's difficult to exactly say for site-specific locations how they're going to implement these. That's part of the process to identify what mitigations apply and how those are going to be applied to a site. So,
So let's take 3.4-2B, conduct surveys for western pond turtles.
mm-hmm.
So do we someplace have what that means? Does that mean I go out there with a six-pack and wander around and look for turtles, or does that mean I hire the world's leading professor in turtle research and do that? So I guess I'm
somewhere in between.
So I'm pointing out that maybe there should be a little guidance along the way that explains what that means a little more. Because somebody in good faith could read this
mm-hmm.
and then submit something and say, no, that's not what we want. What we want is.
Right. And that definitely could be emphasized more in the plan. Now, when it comes to biological surveys, archaeological, cultural resource surveys, wetland delineations, qualified professionals need to complete those studies. Not saying we can't offer more, direction and connect the dots for everybody, but.
Do we have definitions of what that means?
We do, and we have a consultant list, an approved environmental consultant list posted on the website, but that's probably an area we could add some more information just to help folks out.
If I could jump in there.
Yes.
Not to make this a longer meeting than necessary, but in terms of that particular mitigation that you just pulled out, I have the executive summary of the EIR in front of me. That is about a page-long description of mitigation measure 3.4-2B related to turtles. So in that regard, there is a description that's available not only in the executive summary, but also further into the EIR document. What you're referencing here in the transition plan is a list of mitigations for reference. Those definitions do exist. Beyond that, the notion of the consultants that we're choosing to send these checklists to for review, they will be instructed to review any description of this mitigation applied to an operation and to determine if it's appropriate or not. They will be doing the vetting for us to assure that it's either the best scientist for pond turtles or somebody like that, or somebody less than that, somewhere in between, as Director Hunter mentioned. They will be doing that quality control for us. That is part of the process we're setting up here.
I guess, and I appreciate that and pointing that out. I guess I just don't want us to be 6 months from now and people submitting things that they thought were accurate and in good faith, and then us doing the, oh no, now you have to do X.
Right, we don't want that target to move.
Right. Thank you.
Following up on that a little bit, Kim, because I looked through this too, the way I was looking at the mitigations, the list of mitigations, it's a little more addressed in the actual Appendix C document, isn't it? That's kind of what I came up with, was that this is tying it to the Appendix C, like your mitigation measures will be covered in that document.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, that's the process, to identify which, going through the checklist very carefully to make sure you're catching any mitigations that apply to that site. They're recognized, they're identified, and then how they're going to be implemented if, you know, how that's going to occur.
I have a question regarding section 1.5 where it states an applicant in the process of a CUP doesn't need to do an Appendix C.
No.
Can you explain a little detail on that?
Well, there probably should be some additional clarification. So, because our CUPs are taking a little bit of time, and right now, folks may want to consider a Appendix C checklist if they're a ways out on their CUP process. But the idea behind that, the concept is, if you're doing conditional use permit, that requires full CEQA analysis. So you're not doing Appendix C of the EIR, you're completing Appendix G for the initial study process to receive a mitigated negative declaration. That mitigated negative declaration and that initial study will cover everything occurring on the site associated with the commercial cannabis activity. And that will have to go through the full CEQA process. So there's no need to be repetitive and do the checklist C if you are close to getting a mitigated neg deck and getting your item to the board, or excuse me, the planning commission for adoption, because it's covered in that document. You're covered by CEQA. Mm-hmm.
And to reiterate that, any CUP should tier, any CUP environmental document should tier off of the programmatic EIR. That's again, the benefit of the programmatic EIR is to cover a lot of bases, and any subsequent environmental document, such as the negative declarations. Now I understand that slide you were saying.
Yes, thank you.
Any CUP should be using that EIR. It has to use that EIR.
Any additional questions from the board?
Yeah, I have one more question, maybe a couple more questions. In 1.4, I just want to get this clear. Does this mean that the adjacent landowner can comment to the planning department regarding a site before the approval is granted? Or is filing an appeal the only option? And that's 1.4. It was on page 4. Page 4.
Yeah, page 4, in the bottom half.
Just for clarity there.
Well, we often do receive comments, because this is very similar to the process we use now for licenses. We do receive comments, but at the point where we have an approval date set, there needs to be generally some pretty significant comments if we're going to hold off any approval. So generally the approval does occur and then an appeal is filed. We still accept comments, but unless there's something just, you know, that's brought out that's a huge red flag. The point is to vet these files and have our compliance specialists on site and inspect it and have a review that this is in compliance with the code before we even notice. But I will be honest, there have been a few where really significant concerns were presented, and that's, you know, we will take another look. But if it's just like, I don't want this in, you know, near me,
and it meets the criteria of the code, we need to move forward on that. It meets the criteria. So we do issue the approval, and that then forwards to an appeal process.
And then they would have to pay the $500 to appeal.
Correct.
Couple questions, and correct me and help me with this because I'm finding my way through. But I am under the impression that an impact of noise encompasses a distance as far as 350 feet. But we notice up to 300 feet from a proposed site. So I'm seeing a scenario that could happen where this goes through an entire process, a license is issued, 10 days go by because the person wasn't noticed because they're not within 350 feet. Now they are bothered by noise, which seems realistic, and yet we're going to charge them $500 to voice. So maybe the answer is in the price, maybe the answer is in the distance. I'm not sure, but it doesn't seem congruent.
I will jump in real quick. It's not 300 feet of the project, it's 300 feet of the property line.
Thank you for that clarification, yes.
And then
Help me with how that helps me.
So you have a parcel, and any parcel within 300 feet of the outside, not wherever your project is.
And the
The
project,
noise is going to come from here.
the project has a setback of 350 feet on, or, well, from a house.
Well, exactly. So if,
Or it could be less. What's the setback?
The
well, it's
setback's
350 feet from a
feet
house, do we
which-
have a setback from
30.
30 feet.
30 feet?
Actually, 30 feet is for structures. That comes from CAL FIRE statute,
Right.
fire safe. So if it's a garden and cultivation and there's no structures, that cultivation can go closer to the property boundary.
That's not what our ordinance says. There's a 30-foot setback for cultivation activities.
Hold on a second.
I'm sorry, I'm speaking out of turn, but
Even if this was only 30, and this was a 300-foot notice,
Right. So that's 330 feet.
so I'm thinking of that one. I'm doing that wrong.
Well, I mean, there is 20 feet, you are correct there, but I just want to point out that it's 300 feet from the property line. So there could be two different properties here that are 300 feet.
If you have a larger parcel, say 30 acres, and it's in the center, the notifications still go from the property line, not the cultivation site.
Okay.
Just to highlight, that is based off of planning law. And so it's a standard within planning law.
There are some cases when there's a dead-end road with planning projects that we will go out farther. You know, if there's a project at the end of a dead-end road, and obviously there's going to be increased traffic affecting those in certain places, we can do more, but generally that's on a case-by-case basis.
So maybe a better question for me to ask is, what can we do to not just follow the letter of the law, but maybe move away from irreducible minimums to what seems inclusive and maybe save somebody $500 and a whole planning commission's evening? Where if we were, is there room to just be a bit more inclusive and more communicative?
That is up to the Board of Supervisors.
So I think maybe your question would be, or to be more inclusive, is when the notices get sent out. So-
Right, and that would be, if there is a change that is desired to go out farther, that could be in the transition plan. Now, for planning, that's law, but as in the case of this process, I do not see why that couldn't be at the discretion of the board to request maybe 500 feet or something like that. So let me clarify there. We can't change what we do for planning. That's 300 feet in state law. We make case by case, but for this purpose.
So there's a couple of issues there. One is that if we're going to change those, we should change them for all planning. issues, it seems to me. If we're going to have a standard, we just don't pick on one.
I would agree with that. Consistency is important.
Secondly, I think in the past what we've heard is that people weren't notified until late in the process. So if we send those notifications out earlier in the process where people can write the letter, but to actually be heard, you're still going to have to go through the appeals process. Where somebody can actually rule on it, they would have to go through the appeals process. But they could make comments and get on the record in it earlier.
They could, absolutely.
So I'm hearing three things that we should potentially discuss. The distance, the timing, and I would like to potentially talk about the price. It feels encumbering to have $500 for somebody to have a discussion, and maybe that's there because, you know, if it's $10 and you have a line at the door, you know, it needs to be, no, I'm all in. It needs to be significant, I understand that, but it does seem hefty.
So it's based on staff costs, not just the random number that we pick. It's what we've set as a fee schedule for what it costs staff to prepare the information and get it to the planning commission. Because it is labor intensive for staff too.
Okay.
In fact,
Sorry, there we go. Some of the appeals that we work on, that is extremely low for the amount of work we put into the appeals.
So it could be that after the fee study comes back, that number goes up.
Correct. $500 does not cover much.
Okay.
But I know many jurisdictions struggle with that appeal fee, and some are at cost, but it can take a tremendous amount of work.
Okay, fair. So that, if anything, strengthens the need to really target the other two items, which would be distance and time, because then you could avoid that more readily.
With that notification, when those letters go out to adjacent landowners and you get that response, those, I'm thinking in my past experience, those letters become part of the record, and that would go on with the application along with the environmental document. So that at that point, if our consultants look at that and say, okay, we have a concern, this letter states a concern, they're going to look into addressing that at that point, right? Before where it'd be, if there was a, like somebody said, we think that they're violating this CEQA guideline. Our consultants would look at that and say, okay, yeah, this needs to be further analyzed, or are they just going to stick that letter off to the side and wait for the appeal process?
Well, keep in mind that these won't be noticed until the end of the process.
Okay, and that's what I'm wondering. I'm not sure.
And this can be definitely changed. This is proposed. It's similar to what we do right now. But yeah, the consultants would not see those letters because they wouldn't come till after the consultant has done their review and said this is ready for
determination. This is CEQA compliant.
Right.
So if it's CEQA compliant and the determination's been made, then we shouldn't be getting letters that say they're not.
Right. Yes, it may be CEQA compliant, but often CEQA is weaponized to stop projects that are undesirable. We've seen that several times in all types of projects. It happens. It's the reality with CEQA. So oftentimes it is, CEQA issues are cited, but when it comes to something like odor, that's understandable.
Yeah.
To be clear here, there's two parallel processes here. One, the CEQA process that we've discussed, where notification is not as stringently required for this type of process, this addendum process. However, it is very much required under planning law and the court order that the county is operating under. That ruling says that we have to do certain things. So we can do more than what it says as well, is how that language in section 3, paragraph F is stated. So it's a question of processing or the order of operations as was just discussed, but I also want to point out that a fee can be waived by the board on a case-by-case basis. I don't know that that's occurred in the planning department, but it has occurred in the Department of Transportation.
It definitely has occurred, not for appeals. I think that's very dangerous.
I'm not in support of that
I
idea.
would not recommend that for appeals.
So, David, when you say more in there that we could add to this, what would you suggest? Timing wise?
I recognize that in the past, there have been appeals that have been difficult for the Planning Commission. So I understand the discussion related to timing and distance. My stance is that I would like this to move forward, and I think that this structure is appropriate. However, it can be changed in the future, should the board wish it to be changed. Should you see problems that arise that become something of concern to your constituents, that this can be addressed in the future. That is the reason that this is in resolution format in front of you, to make that a process that can be adapted. I believe you mentioned adaptive management at one point. So I very much sympathize with the appeal consideration, and there's several options for how this can be structured, but this is how it's drafted here, and I would suggest moving forward with it.
Thank you. I do agree it is a living document, and we can work with it as we go.
I just would be concerned that it lives so much that it jumps off some table. It needs to be concrete enough that we're really comfortable with it at this time, right?
Yes, I like the analogy. If that's,
Okay.
Yeah.
You had another question? Me? No, Jill.
Not this time.
No, okay.
Anybody else?
I actually did have one question about the CEs that you talked about that are still going to be valid. Will they only be valid for 1 year for the life of the license?
No, it's a CEQA determination that stands,
Okay.
unless there's changes to the site.
So as long as the site remains unchanged, all right? And then one other thing, just because I have to prove that I read it. 1.8, the fourth row, there's a typo. It says,
There's a few. And
it says wand instead of with and comma and. So
Okay.
it threw me for a loop, so I noticed that
Thank
one.
you.
Hey, I told them about it.
Yeah, there's a few, it is, made a few notes myself. Some cleaning up to do, I apologize. But the plan is before you.
So I would just say thank you guys. I mean, really, this is, it took 9 months. I'm sure there's a lot of upset people here and out there. But to put this, in front of us right now is huge. I think it's a great stepping stone for this county, for the growers of this community. We owe them something. As a board, I feel I owe them something. And I won't speak about previous boards or anything, but it's gone on. It's been going on for a while, and it's on my back too. I've been here for 9 months. I'm not exclusive of doing everything right or wrong here, but I think we have a chance right now to make things right, to get this thing moving forward, to get our local farmers some clarity in their future. This is a living, breathing document. I think we will be, probably challenged on the cumulative effects, which are the tentacles off that are just so far-ranging that I don't know how, especially when we throw in the black market grows. It's going to be tough. But I just wanted to thank you guys for getting us out here, getting it to us, getting it to the people, and giving us all a peace of mind, something to work with, something that we can sit down and have it evolve as we evolve as a community. So I appreciate both you and David getting this together and getting it in front of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, you're welcome.
Thank you, sir. I applaud Kim and her Director Hunter and her hard work here.
So has, after reading through which you will read later, it looks to me like we're being set up for another lawsuit here. The information that came in today, but has Derek gone through this and approved it, that this makes us CEQA compliant, that nothing in here violates the court order and CEQA law?
Yes. Derek Cole has reviewed it. He had some comments, and the revisions were made.
Okay. Margaret, same question to you.
Yes, both Derek Cole and myself have reviewed it and made comment.
So we're highly confident that from a CEQA standpoint that this will stand.
Yes, I mean, from my perspective, it provides more protections than CEQA even requires, but so it is over compliant with CEQA.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm not sure, at one point I know you're going to go to public comment and different things are going to be said, and I'm not sure when it is appropriate for me to make this next comment. It's not a question. Is that a now or a later? Chair?
Later.
That would be later. Public comment.
Okay.
Any questions from the board?
I have another question for council, I guess. Again, regarding information reached today, what about the idea of having this as a resolution rather than a ordinance? Is that, in your view, is it legal to do this as a resolution?
It's legal and appropriate. I think the board summarized it well. This is a living document and will be revised as the program changes and grows. So this is an excellent mechanism to enact law that has the ability to be modified.
Thank you. I just wanted to hear that for the record.
Any other questions? All right, then we can open up to public comment. We'll start with members here in the room, members of the public in the court chambers. If you'd like to make public comment.
Good morning, Lisa Wright, Lewiston, Chair and board members. Just a few things, and you touched on some of them in your questions that I think we could build on this transition plan. The appeal process, I think, needs to be better solidified. Timelines put in place, those are lacking. Guidelines on additional reports. I think there may perhaps a link, within the website, that's lacking now. The density consideration, I did hear Director Hunter mention focus on watershed areas. None of that is defined or published that I know of, that who's going to make this density consideration, how it's going to go about. That would be certainly very helpful so it doesn't come up later. And actually your transition plan says that in order to avoid delays and extra costs, that the density consideration should come early. But there's no method for how that's going to be conducted. CEs, good to hear that those are going to stay in place. That was in question for a long time. DCC has said they're not going to recognize Trinity CEs. We've heard that, in our submission of documents, so that might be something that needs some clarification with DCC. Let me just, since I have time, go in a little bit more depth. On the appeal process, there is CEQA statute section 15112 statute of limitations where there's a 30-day limit on filing court challenges on a CEQA determination. So we might be in conflict somewhat with our appeal process with the 10-day notice period, then the 10 days for a hearing. If Planning Commission, if it's appealed again, the timing of that, we might not make that 30-day window of challenge for under CEQA statute. So that's something to consider and see how we could marry that up. David's shaking his head, but I'll continue so my time doesn't elapse. Timelines not in the transition plan, but are needed. So under Trinity County Code, there's this review period. I think County Council has said at various points that that doesn't apply to the review of applications. I don't know how that applies or if we can apply it here, where there's a 30-day period of review for completeness. Then if it's incomplete, it goes back, and then there's another period of time for the applicant to respond, maybe another 30-day period. Then the 30-day period kicks in again. Fish and Wildlife has a really good complete, incomplete, and then a 60-day draft agreement must be provided, or whatever you provided goes into effect. So I think we need to put some tighter kind of timelines, and I can work with ad hoc and talk about that.
but it looks like my time's about up, but those are the main things: appeal process, timelines, guideline additional reports, density consideration, which includes kind of focus on the watershed areas. What are those, and where is that specified in the EIR, and who's going to make that determination? Thank you.
Thanks for comments. We can go to Zoom comments. Emma, at your own order of discretion.
Scott White.
Good morning, Board Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Scott White, Lewiston Road, Lewiston. As the Chairman said, this is long awaited, but I've heard the following words used: cleaning up to do, difficult, confusing, unclear, clarification, and unsure. I was certain before this meeting I was going to ask for this to be continued. I'm absolutely convinced now, especially given that the county's lost 2 court cases already. Why would we want to rush this? We've only had 3 days to look at this as the public and the board as well. I take count with your county council saying you comply with CEQA. I did notice during the EIR that you have portions of your ordinance that are not compliant with state law. I won't go into those now. So I really think, like Ms. Wright said, that why would we want to rush this when we're in the face of another potential legal challenge? Because quite frankly, if you continue this from today, I get to provide my comments to the board. If you don't continue this in the act today, I have to provide my comments to the Trinity Action Alliance. I don't want to do that as a citizen. I'd rather provide my comments to you as a citizen. I think that's the appropriate way for us as a county. I also don't think you're aware that with the COVID issue going on, the schools are in a big uproar about the mandates. And yesterday there was a countywide, actually statewide, walkout to protest the mandates. I'm on the Lewiston School Board. My board authorized me to be there to support our constituents, parents, and staff. There were probably 200 people between the courthouse and the community and where I was. There were people from Lewiston, Weaverville, from Hayfork, a ton of people from Hayfork, and they were actually going to go back and do more protesting. And so you had kids, grandparents, everybody, and you have all that concern going on. And so I'm really concerned with the optics that the board's going to give, especially with the backdrop of court cases, to the public saying, you didn't have a lot of time anyway, and we're forcing you to choose between the health and well-being of your children, potentially losing your job, your source of employment. So we're setting ourselves up really to show the public, as and certainly as an elected official myself, why would we want to dirty the waters on this and not give the public time to participate? I've actually been working on things for my board, sitting here all morning because of the way you changed the agenda, for issues related to COVID. I haven't had time to work on this. It just popped out. I thought, wow, we need more time. So anyway, I think for respect for your public, respect for the work that has been done, the work that needs to be done, and the fact that I really don't, as a taxpayer, want to pay to lose another lawsuit. I don't think that's good use of my tax money. I would really prefer the board to continue this. I think it's very clear from the testimony today, it's not ready. And so I would just ask you to respect the public and respect the offices that you are in position to do, and allow us time to adequately prepare and participate in our local government. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your comments.
Adrian Keys.
Good morning, Adrian Keys from Hayfork, President of the Trinity County Agriculture Alliance. First, I want to thanks for the good news on the budgeting process for the local assistance grant coming in. That $3.2 million not only help all of the cultivators get through the CEQA process, but can also be used to assist in the implementations that will bring long-term environmental benefit to our county. We do have a few questions and comments on the document and a few requests. We would like to see regular and clear communications with the Department of Cannabis Control and the county, confirming that this plan is indeed leading towards annual licenses. We request that there's clear and regular communication with applicants concerning any progress or holdups on their process. And we'd also like to make sure that the determination of compliance must qualify to achieve local jurisdictional approval, that the determination of compliance will satisfy all CEQA requirements, and that the memo to file will result in a negative or in a notice of determination. We really want to see all of the applicants get strong documents here. But all we really are asking is the goal remain the same, that the CEQA compliance pathway provided by this document leads to a notice of determination and results in a full annual state and local license. We do hope that the board passes this item today and that we're allowed to move forward and begin to implement our mitigations. Right. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have Rachel Dowdy next.
Good morning. I'm here on behalf of Trinity Action Alliance Association, and I'm an attorney for that group. And I would ask you to consider delay on this action. It's been months in the preparation, and as somebody else said, we've only had a few days to look at it, and so we've been forced into a laundry list of complaints rather than a constructive dialogue on the issue in order to preserve our rights. The first point I'd like to make is that this is not, in fact, appropriate for resolution if it's doing what it appears it's intended to do by today's discussion. Resolutions is a basic concept, don't have the force of law. Within a jurisdiction, they're supposed to be expressions of opinions on evidence. They're not supposed to be ordinances. It's not a way to turn an ordinance into an adaptive management plan. I do have concerns about the cumulative impacts and disagree with the statement that there's no obligation to consider illegal activities. If the county doesn't consider illegal activities, it does have a detrimental impact on those growers who are trying to comply legally, because at some point the conditions in a particular watershed may become so bad that the CDFW will issue a moratorium on issuing new permits. They have to do that because they have to consider the ambient conditions. You also have to consider the ambient conditions in the present baseline in issuing permits. You also can't exempt your CEs here through this resolution. That's a legislative action if at all, and if excluding people who have previously obtained a CE from the checklist and from the mitigation measures in the ordinance, particularly those people who obtained a CE before you adopted the ordinance in December of 2020, you risk exempting them from the conditions of that ordinance. Those mitigation measures were identified by you as critical, and they should be required of everybody who's operating legally under a permit in the county. Another point is you can't defer mitigation measures, as somebody had said. The mitigation measures that you've incorporated as a basic premise of CEQA law, they have to be enforceable, they have to be real. So if you are changing something that was in the PIR and incorporated into your ordinance, you need to make sure that those are enforceable mechanisms and you're not by resolution going back and changing your EIR or your ordinance. That's what makes you vulnerable, not the fact that you're processing these. I want to be really clear that TAA really wants you to succeed, as we've said before multiple times. So I would urge you to just take a moment, do this by ordinance if you need to do it, but I think your existing ordinance is functional and good. So don't try to work around CEQA with a 3-day notice in a resolution. Use your existing ordinance and do what needs to be done. Thanks.
Chris W.
Hello, good afternoon, supervisors. This is Chris Williams of Weaverville. So I guess my statement is this really a plan? We've waited a year for this, quote, starting point, transition plan. We received a rough draft with a cut and paste feel, glaring grammatical errors, and a lack of timeline for processing of these Appendix Cs for all priority levels, among many other things. It makes it not only difficult to read, but frankly embarrassing. And it's reminiscent, I apologize to my professors, of a few essays in grad school that were due at 8 a.m. and I started writing them at midnight. But the planning department hasn't had nearly a year to write this, not several hours, nor is it an educational institute or rather a governing agency. This document has real-world implications that affect the livelihood of Trinity County residents. So I implore the board to return this draft to the Planning Commission, ask for timelines for the Appendix C submission process in clear, concise writing that renders a truly comprehensive plan. So hold the planning department accountable for its governance over a multi-million-dollar program. We're laying the foundation, and we finally do have a jumping off point, but I ask, where are we jumping off into? So to give this program the respect that it deserves, rewrite, refine, and hold a special meeting as soon as possible for future and further review of this. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your comments.
David Albies?
Oh, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Yes, I want to ask for a continuance for all the reasons stated before. It's ridiculous to assume that the public can make comments on a Friday afternoon disclosure of the document just before the weekend and then have it all done in one day. But here's my attempt. The first sentence in the CEQA streamlining is not true. Nothing has been done to map existing underground water usage to determine ecological effects and pre-existing use restrictions, which is turning out to be the most significant impact in our county. Natural resources and personnel uses, downstream effects, etc. Nothing. And when it turns around to the State Water Board, they rely on you for your groundwater plan and analysis, and you don't have one. So of course they just turn around and say it's the county's responsibility, therefore I guess it passes CEQA. Next, what is the site-specific or county-wide CEQA, ER as precedent? Can it be both? What I'm trying to say is the document says site-specific and the county keeps quoting the county-wide EAR as precedents. So which one is it? Streamlining, how will the county be able to determine cumulative effects from previously done incomplete CEQAs? Court found county was not doing proper CEQAs, so how can the county now determine existing CEQAs not done correctly? Now will be used in streamlining. Having applicants do their own CEQAs checklist without any plan for county site inspections, not mentioned in the TP, is inadequate, and county will spend much more money on consultant fees before determining that it was a poor checklist. What determines compliance determination? Not one word about what is and what determines client determination in a document that's supposed to do so. So the county should complete entire license documentation before submitting to state, allowing applicants to apply for state licenses before county. This has caused multiple issues throughout this time frame. County's full license before submitting to state for license saves county lots of money. Applicants should not be allowed to identify their own mitigations. 1-3, page 4, needs public comment. That's ridiculous to assume that we can only go through an appeal process. Terms do not, the 3.4 term does not revoke license. 4.1 needs to be fixed, can't read it properly. There's 9 errors on 1 page alone. Public review is essential for all changes to license. Let's say that a license decides to go from 4,000 plants to 12,000 plants and can do so within that spot. Water usage goes up, noise goes up, and to assume that public comment shouldn't be happening is ridiculous. MM3.10.1A, county does not have any underground water plan to determine water use allocations, so how can you refer to it? And what is an acceptable DP level in MM3.4-2.2N? That's just some of it, thank you. I have a lot more, but anyway, please defer this and get it right.
Thank you. Veronica Kelly Albies.
Good morning, Supervisors. As this plan was only posted on Friday, there was a brief period of time to review, but I will do my best to articulate my serious concerns regarding this draft transition plan. My overall impression is that this is a very nice grouping of words that have the exact same meaning and continue the exercise that creates a lack of CEQA oversight that currently exists in the program. There's no mention of physical site visits by qualified county staff to at the very least verify submitted information was accurate. And now it seems we have a new phrase being introduced, determination of compliance. I'm also drawn to paragraphs that specifically point out how to avoid public input or does not need to be circulated for public review and comment nor adoption at a public hearing. For public noticing, Kim mentions the 10 days, which has always been a problem. So if someone is gone with their family on spring break or it's sports season and someone misses that notice, it's too bad, so sad, they just don't get the notice. Online CEQA notices state things between 20 and 30 days. Well, can that be adjusted somehow? The current notice to adjacent landowners has always left a great deal to be desired. And the appeal process only a way to speak, that is ridiculous. Until a new official director is at the helm, who will prepare an addendum? How will it be verified? And who will weigh the public input that comes in? Under filed mitigation implementation, is there a timeline for a fix, or is denial revocation immediate? With limited staff, how can an MMRP be a viable plan? To date, enforcement has been a struggle for checklist items that are required immediately. The lack of public input is concerning, and the lack of allowable public input. Basically, this plan appears to provide a path of least resistance, least amount of work, least CEQA on-site review by qualified staff, least possibility of enforcement, least amount of transparency to entire public, least amount of public input, least amount of overall public planning and protection. If all we can do is the least amount, perhaps now is the time to reevaluate our cannabis ordinance and allowable zoning areas to find appropriate allowable space within these guidelines where cannabis may exist in the county that won't feel like it will violate public trust, general public quality of life, and provide cannabis businesses a better landscape for success. It seems like the least you could do for the overall general public of Trinity County. This should be deferred. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments.
Carla Avila?
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. This is Carla Avila from Playa Palm and Executive Director of Trinity County Agricultural Alliance. I think in some ways you guys are getting slammed a lot for this particular document, which doesn't reflect the entire whole, right? We have the ordinance, we have the PEIR, which has been discussed as the cornerstone. And what we're discussing today is the process. And so I'm not a lawyer, but I am confused as to how a process has to become an ordinance. I believe we have the ordinance and that this is the pathway to NOD process that we are talking about today. So I think by all means, I fully respect all of the questions that are being asked, and I think it is really important that we consider that we need to continue to clarify this process as it unfolds. There are things that are imperative. And ultimately, we need to just ensure that this is legally viable, that it has been hopefully communicated with the DCC, and that regular and clear communication will continue to occur with the DCC. Confirm this plan will lead to satisfactory requirements for full annual licensure and CEQA compliance. And I know that's what we're all striving for. I think what we're struggling to see here is definitely complex, and there's a lot of really valid comments about the details that can be improved. Still, a resolution is not, it's a way to affirm an intent from my understanding of the purpose of a resolution. And again, I'm not a lawyer, but I've been very invested in this process for a long time, and we did have our CEQA attorneys look at this, and ultimately we just want to ensure that it's been vetted by DCC as a plan, and that the pathway to NOD and CEQA compliance is there, so that we are protecting the county from liability and applicants have a robust document moving forward that truly stands the test of time, because CEQA is supposed to be for the life of that project, and that project cannot be developed in any other way without subsequent EIR, as has been discussed today. So, it's hard to get into all the details in 3 minutes, but it seems like with the ad hoc committee and with this laid out as a process and as a plan that, we have to find the pathway forward, and we can't always see the whole path, but we need to be able to step forward. So thank you so much for all the effort that has been made. And I think I'm out of time. Thanks.
Carol Fensel?
Hi, Carol Fensel from Lewiston. It seems to me like we're putting the cart before the horse. And shouldn't we have a county rezoning plan done before we start issuing licenses? We had to come up with our own opt-out area. And instead of making each individual landowner fight a commercial cannabis grow and have each neighborhood come up with their own opt-out plan, wouldn't it be better to have the rezoning plan, have it planned out where the grows are approved and where they're not approved?
1 minute, we're having technical problems.
It's just the first heat of the fire.
Yeah, burn it up.
Just
Dust on the coils, but it smells like we're melting ground in here.
Is that the first time you put the heat on?
We shouldn't be.
No, it's not on.
Yeah.
It's not on.
It's on fan.
So it's like it's on fire, is that what?
Doors all out.
I do, shouldn't take
Richard's out.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Are you ready to continue with public comment?
Yeah, let's see if Richard comes up with.
Do you want a letter from?
Yeah, just see what he thinks.
He's back.
Did you fix it?
Not the library, it's not the bathroom, it's not outside. So it's only us that's. Where did the fans? Overheat our air conditioning? Yes. Chilled it.
Okay. Is the board ready to continue with public comment?
We're good.
All right, Carol Fensel, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Then, if you're ready, you can continue. I apologize for the pause.
Okay, no problem. Again, would be wise to do the rezoning plan, so communities would have the option to do their opt-out, rather than each individual and each neighborhood having to go through the same process we had to go through to do an opt-out. Secondly, why do the adjacent landowners have to pay such a large fee to fight against a change to their neighborhood? Shouldn't the growers that want to make the change have to pay that fee? 10 days are definitely not enough time for notice. If you're on vacation or you just don't happen to get to the mail, you're out of luck. That doesn't sound very fair. And 3 days to review this before, and no real good chance for discussion. We just need to put this on hold. And allowing the license without finishing the mitigations seems crazy, because you're hoping that they go through with it. You even mentioned there's no process to verify that they're going to follow through with it. So there's a lot of problems that I see, and I'd really like to see neighborhoods be able to speak up and opt out before you start issuing licenses, so we don't have to keep going through one area at a time, one neighbor at a time, and have areas that are perfect for the grows and areas that we want to opt out. Thank you very much.
Tom Belenko?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Tom Belenko, Douglas City. A couple of things right at the outset. Do I wish we saw this plan 9 months ago instead of now? Yes, absolutely. Are there a lot of things, not the least of which are grammatical errors and sentence structure and musts and mays that could be changed and ought to be changed? Also, another yes. However, is it legally sound, and does it accurately implement the programmatic EIR in our ordinance? Also yes. I agree with county council, both county councils, the special counsel, Derek Cole and Margaret Long, that this is a legally sound document. It does implement CEQA, it follows the guidelines, it follows established case law in the interpretation of CEQA where there are occasional discrepancies on what does this definition mean, what do these terms mean, what is or is not deferred when we're talking about mitigation. I think it is what our British friends would call particularly rich to hear TAA and TAA council say, oh, send this back, look at it for a longer time after they've imposed a deadline of, 10 days to roll up the cannabis program in Trinity County. So, no. Is this perfect? Far from it. Is it sound legally? Yes. Should you pass it today? Yes. We can change it as it goes along. I have, as you, I think, are aware, some fundamental issues with the ordinance and the programmatic EIR. I know Derek Cole is involved in a trial next month, but as soon as that's wrapped up and his time frees up, I encourage us to sit down and seek to resolve those outstanding issues so that case can be dismissed. But in the meantime, let us start this process. Let's start with the Appendix Cs. It is a tall order. We're losing our planning director, but I think consultants can work with this plan, can work with the programmatic EIR we have, and we actually have a possibility of meeting the timelines that we know we need to meet to keep this program functional. So, again, I agree with many of the comments. However, I think you should adopt this, let's get started and move forward. And it's not like this will be the first time we've adjusted something along the way. Thank you.
Rhoda Kane.
Hi, this is Rhoda King from Trinity Center. Everyone involved in the project for all your hard work, and I am also hoping that we can adopt this today and get moving forward as soon as possible. Thank you.
I have no other raised hands and no new chats.
All right, then we'll bring it back to the board.
We have raised hands in the room.
Is this the last public comment?
Yes, please.
Please, approach the podium.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank everyone for all their hard work getting this done. You've all heard from me many times requesting that we have a transition plan in place. While I think everyone here can agree that it's not perfect, it is a step in the right direction. I don't know if it's possible, now that we have an ad hoc that is committed and has started meeting and is meeting with other people, if we could perhaps pass this today so we can move forward and set a date to come back with a tightening up of the document and some more, some guidance as Lisa suggested. While the cannabis program has been on hold, nothing else is. Cannabis farmers who pay $300 a month to hold a bank account with CoCentral are at risk of losing that account because they don't have an active carrying license, even though they are still active with the state. The tax issue, people are trying to pay their taxes, and our tax office, in my opinion, is misreading the ordinance and not tiering, and that's taking more time, and they're charging more money. We apparently have some more pending litigation, it sounds like. In response to people's concerns about missing their mail, the notices are in the newspaper. They could be found there as well. So while this isn't perfect and it needs more work, we don't have more time, and a lot is at risk right now. So I ask that you please adopt this today. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have more raised hands. Walter Wood.
Hello, my name is Walter Wood. I live on South Forest Road in far edge, Trinity County. I would like to voice my opinion that this is really important to pass this to allow us a pathway forward and allow us to keep contributing to these communities and being part of this beautiful landscape out here. Thank you.
Patrick Kahn.
Yeah, hi, this is Patrick Collins from Sawyer, and I just wanted to encourage you guys to pass this. We've put a lot of work into this, and I think it's almost erroneous to assume that that the growers haven't pitched in a lot of time and energy, and just to keep pushing the hard work of staff and stuff down the road, I think would be disingenuous. And I respect everyone's concerns about this, but I think that this is the time to accept it and continue to move forward with the momentum that we have. And I appreciate that consideration. Thanks.
And John Brower.
Hello, Supervisors. Yeah, I agree with much of what has been said, especially Tom Blanco's comments that would have been great to have worked through the details of this many months ago, but what you have before you is a good start. And it seems like the logical step forward at this time. The document is hard to read, and particularly the footnotes section. Starting on page, I think of your packet would be 538, and continuing at least until page 550 of your packet. It seems that you might want to just drop all of those pages. They're redundant, confusing, and at times even contradictory. Particularly on page 548 of your packet, the PC oversight function, that the PC would be accepting compliance determinations. That actually contradicts the entire rest of the document. That it would be the chairman of the board of supervisors that would be giving that final acceptance to compliance determinations. But I think that really helps clean up the document and make it more cohesive if you just drop those pages. But other than that, we have a statement of overriding considerations in our EIR, programmatic EIR, and all environmental impacts and options for mitigating them that were available at that time or known at that time were analyzed in the document, and it is a certified document. So I say we continue moving forward and start running projects through the Appendix C matrix to determine their impacts and which mitigation measures apply. And yes, the county needs some robust means of monitoring compliance with those mitigations as they're implemented over time or not. And we've got a path here. So let's start taking steps down it and get people to work. Thank you.
All right. I have no more raised hands and no more chats.
All right, we'll bring it back to the board then. Additional discussion from the board? After hearing comments?
There are certainly comments on both sides of moving forward today and not moving forward today, but just the comment that is most concerning to me is a desire to, I would say, repeat past mistakes. The comment was, let's just pass it today, we can fix it later. And we've lived a number of years now of, or our difficulties are because we are trying to build an airplane we're already flying. So if we were wise, we might just take, it doesn't have to be even a week. If people, now you've got this transition plan in front of you, what it becomes when it's cleaned up and fixed couldn't possibly be day to night of what it's going to be when it is cleaned up and fixed, which would suggest to me that people have a reasonable idea of here's what you can be doing over the next few days if you want to move forward with what it is you're going to need to do. But taking a pause to make sure that it's right before it's signed off, for me personally, I won't sign a blank check. I would like to see it clean before it gets my vote to move forward. And I just think that it's really important to make sure that we don't put ourselves back with more risk before us. We can, not going to finish that sentence, that's the end of my comments. I think it's wise to wait, clean it up, just takes a few days. It's also really wise to allow people to speak into it. The timeline of having been provided this around end of day on Friday and make a decision over something this important without people being able to be responded to and fact check is critical. And I'm not saying that what was put forward by our staff is any way disingenuous at all, but mistakes can be made, oversights can be there, and just a few days to fix it just seems wise to me.
I'm confused, what are you asking to fix? So if we're gonna delay, we're gonna give direction to staff to do something, what specific items besides grammatical errors are you asking them to change?
Okay, certainly. An important question is, what are the questions I need to be asking that I don't know to ask yet? So maybe I don't have direction at this moment, please fix this list of items and make them say thus and so, because I don't have the understanding to provide that, but others do. So time to receive that and then give that direction is what I'm asking for. I don't have a list at this moment.
Any further discussion?
I'm watching Supervisor Groves, he's smoking, I'm always.
Well, I do have a little heartburn that I would like to have more time for public input. What I hear out there, for example, the comment, let's do a general plan and rezone before we do this. That'd be great. That's the way it should be done, but we don't have 6 years or 5 years. Notice how I'm up to 6 from 5. So even though that's a wonderful suggestion and would be proper in a planning world, it's just not reality. I hear a lot of the same thing that I've heard, and maybe this has just become my bias. These are the same things that I've heard for coming on a major part of my adult life. That this breaks down to, I don't want cannabis here, and so let's delay it and look for a way to do that. I do genuinely believe that we need to have a better process for the public to make comments in before the appeal process. I think this is not, at this time, not a normal project that people should have input in before they have the appeals. I've always felt the appeals, if you win the appeal, you should get your money back. If you lose the appeal, you pay. And that's something we can discuss later on that process. But overall, I think I hear this document being attacked, and I think that's grossly unfair. This is a reasonable document. If we delay, I'm not against delaying for a few days and coming back and letting people have more comments, but I'm not quite sure what that's going to do for us, except give people the right to make comment. We're not going to tell staff today, these are the things we're going to fix, and bring that back and let's go. So, though I don't object to it and allow people to have their say, I don't see the great benefit in it. So I could go either way or not.
So a couple of the responses, just because I'm not sure which part of those comments were directed at me and which comments were directed really toward the comments. So I'll just go from the bottom up. You're saying I would not be opposed to a bit of a delay for others to be able to speak into this, yet I don't really know what that's going to accomplish. You couldn't from this point have any idea what that's going to accomplish. If it accomplishes nothing, what was 3 days? If it accomplishes something that's really helpful, then that was worth it. So there's some risk. The other thing it accomplishes is that this is supposed to be a public process to an extent. We have our experts telling us how to proceed and guiding us through that. But we all have to live with the results. And so to say that we have all the answers feels really arrogant to me, and maybe that's a really strong word, but that's how it strikes me when we don't give time to let people speak in. So I think that that is really important. To say the document is being attacked, I personally am not trying to attack the document. So I hope that our staff does not hear that out of me. It does make sense, you know. I guess if anything, I would refer back to the 11 and 59th hour that was made towards someone else, and maybe I'm feeling that way a little bit. I'm feeling like I don't have enough time to absorb because I don't understand this well enough, and maybe I'm asking for the time, and I'm doing so on behalf of others. To say, I'm not saying that we should complete the general plan and the zoning ordinance. I wish that had been done years ago before we ever launched this. So if that was toward one of my comments, I'm not saying that. And if your comment about I don't want cannabis, that if that was directed toward me, I'm not saying that either. What I want is risk management. I want to make sure that we don't end up back in spaces where we were. And I think that a few days to make sure that that happens is reasonable.
Well, for the record, not one of my comments was addressed towards you.
Okay.
So I was going off of the public input that I heard. Go ahead, Dan.
One of the issues I have, we were hearing about, we did hear some attacks against this document, and one of the concerns that I have is it sounds like people are attacking the EIR through the transition plan, which to me the transition plan is only a method. We're basically, this is direction to staff of how to tie our programmatic EIR to our ordinance. We're not changing the ordinance and we're not changing the EIR. This is just paperwork to put them together. So really at this point, I don't understand how we're changing things. I don't know why people are some of the public comment people are up in arms like we're doing away with CEQA. That's not what we're doing. Well, what this document's for, and it is, it can be a little bit long-winded, it can be a hard read. It's a legal document to tie together our EIR and our program. So to me, the issue isn't that we're trying to sidestep CEQA with this document. We're not trying to. All it is direction to staff on how to do it, direction to the cannabis community on what they have to do to be CEQA compliant. So it's if we wanted to wait a couple days to read it, I really don't think that a couple days to read this is going to solve people's CEQA questions, because what they would need to do is take a couple days to read this and then a couple of months to read the PEIR to tie it all together. So I don't think that's where I do agree with Keith. I don't think that we gain a lot by waiting a few days to get more public input. I would not be opposed to it, but I don't think that we're not changing our CEQA document by accepting this. We're not changing our ordinance, our cannabis cultivation ordinance, by accepting this. So I don't know where the real rub is.
On further reflection, I think the only thing that I see by giving this time is for our legal counsel to look at some of the input that was dropped in us as with 3 minutes before the meeting to analyze that. I don't want to be in a situation where we lose a case. As I said previously, I'm fairly confident that this is a setup to attack and sue us again for what we received. So if we allow those comments and allow County Council and Derek to go through those and explain to us why these comments are incorrect, then I would support it. But I would surely like to have this completed this week.
Supervisor Gogan, anything you'd like to add?
First of all, I thought it was a little bit odd that we would get this letter after our meeting started today. We talked about a short time to disseminate. That would be the antithesis of that. So, today I heard from people, public comments, some people couldn't get through the urgency plan or the transition plan, and it is lengthy, it's wordy, and it is our fluid transition plan that we plan to tear off of and work with. Then again, I did hear some people who had disseminated the plan in 97 different ways. So they also had plenty of time to look at our transition plan and came up with 100 different things that they liked or did not like about it. So I guess it depends on how you look at it and how much you're willing to look at it. And like Dan said, this is not the last leg of this. We're just moving forward with what we have in front of us. I think that there'll be many changes made to it over time. It is a living document. I think there's progress with it. I guess I would say the only question that I do have is the same one that Keith just mentioned. It has been the thorn on our side. And I really don't want to give any more time than today. I do trust the people that are our counsel on this document. So I would leave it, I guess, to Margaret and Derek to if they feel confident in this document moving forward, knowing that it's not a set in stone document, but a viable, fluid, adaptable management tool. If they feel confident with that, I would feel confident also, knowing that we're all going to go back and look at it and change some things, soon or later. So I would move forward with it with those caveats.
I'll add that, this is a draft of this plan. It's only 44 pages long, half of which is composed of definitions and footnotes, which leaves about 20 pages for review. Personally, I don't think 3 days is that difficult to review 20 pages. Some of the content might be complicated if you haven't been following the program for the last 3, 4, or 5 years, or if you never paid attention to the EIR and participated in that process. All this could be very confusing. But as Supervisor Frazier said, otherwise this is essentially a bridge document to merge current to approved and planned future. That's my take on it. And it is a adaptive document that can be adjusted. And not to disregard concerns of the people that brought those things up, but a lot of those concerns I don't think can be addressed in this process, and a lot of them are the bigger picture, such as looking at a RRR program for relocation of problematic licensed grows in small neighborhoods. A lot of the problems still, in my opinion, stem from about 24 poorly placed permitted grows that can be looked at and worked on a more intensive special needs basis. Humboldt County did a great program with their RRR, relocating problematic grows out of neighborhoods into more rural, isolated areas that were the proper conditions to have a cannabis grow on it. And that is written in our EIR. I would encourage people to check out the RRR suggestion inside of the EIR because it's pretty good.
I have a response.
Yeah, please.
So I know Supervisor Brown well enough to know that he would not intentionally be offensive toward me, but I am having a little bit of trouble not taking offense in that I'm not an expert. And I haven't been watching this process closely for 6 years, and I haven't read word by word the entire EIR. And it is confusing for me to get through 22 pages and feel like I really understand what I'm, in a sense, signing. And so I just would respectfully ask that even though you don't feel like an extra few days is really necessary, I'm asking the board, may I please have a few extra days?
So let me throw in just another comment. This is not meant to Jill or anybody. It seems odd that today, after the board meeting started, I get a piece of paper that's threatening what seems like litigation before we've even decided what we're going to do. And I don't know what we would ever do to thwart that effort that's going to be made and be put upon us, I think, no matter what we do. We hadn't even decided today. And here I am looking at a raised hand now that threatened to possibly litigate. And it seems like last minute. I don't even know what the laws are and taking things after we get into the chambers and start the meeting. But it's just disturbing to me in that way. Do we need more time? Some people may, some people may not. I'll leave that up to the rest of the board. But that part of this day was a little bit odd to me, and I wanted to put that forward.
Supervisor Cox, if we were to extend or look at this again, let's say on Friday, what would be your main hope for the 3 additional days?
What I would do is consider, I have asked some other people, hey, can you give me some feedback? And there are some consultants that, one in particular, said, I would love to give you my feedback, Jill, but what I needed to do on my weekend, I really needed to do that. And so over the course of my Monday, I just didn't have time to look through this and be able to respond to you. I would like to hear what he has to say. Staff has been enormously responsive when I say, hey, I have these questions, and I've taken some in and spent that time. Some of the questions I was met with, okay, great, I understand that now. Some of them were met with, ooh, awesome, good catch, we need to fix that. And they're simple things, it's not like it's a huge deal. I just want that full understanding, and I want other people to be able to have the time that they need to feel like they're part of the process, to feel like it's a public process and that's fair. So for me, I feel more comfortable just with myself being able to feel like I've wrapped my head all the way around it as best as I can, and I feel like other people need to speak into it. So that's what Friday would accomplish for me. It would accomplish a bit more peace of mind.
Chair, if I may, just from a staff perspective and a legal review perspective, I cannot give assurance to the board that we could have all these issues looked at and addressed by a Friday deadline. From a legal perspective, we are very comfortable with this document being legally sufficient to move forward. We understand there's some procedural issues or some technical issues that should be addressed going forward as it is a working document. My recommendation would be, if it's the board's pleasure, to move forward with it today and set it on the agenda for next board meeting. Have it a date certain coming back And that would give us a period of time to accept additional comments from a staff and legal perspective and analyze them and come back to you with a more thorough and formal presentation on the remaining issues. At that time, if the board would like to revise it, they can, and that will go into effect immediately. It's not like an ordinance where we have to wait 30 days. It will get fixed and go into effect immediately at the next meeting. From a staff perspective, that would be my recommendation.
Thanks for the clarification, that is very helpful.
Would this put off us taking appendix Cs?
No, it would not. So as I said, the recommendation from staff is to move forward on this document. We believe it's legally sufficient. But again, it would allow us to take Cs. Folks would understand that there could potentially be some minor revisions to it, particularly looking at appeals, which we wouldn't be dealing with until then anyway, so it wouldn't have any effect on them. But from the areas that we'd be taking the Appendix C on, those are very well set in stone through the EIR. We know what those are. We can move forward on this, and all the other surrounding issues we can deal with again at the next meeting.
So I have a question. I mean, the question was posed to me, why do you want a few extra days? And I guess I need to pose the question, when is it going to hurt? Why is fire burning?
There's multiple fires burning. I believe we have in the queue a number of individuals who are looking for doing that. We have consultants on standby who are reserving time to do this. If we don't get to them to get started on their work, likely they will not be there when we need them. And our program right now is dependent on these consultants to review these documents. So again, if we push this out too far and they don't have any work to start, they still have to pay their bills and they're going to find other work to get moving on. In addition, again, there's no legal harm in moving forward on, especially with the acceptance of the Appendix C. So I would, from a legal perspective, I see no reason to delay it for that purpose. But again, it's the board's pleasure how to proceed.
So meaning the two consultants, LACO and Helix, you're saying that if we didn't approve this today and we approved it on Friday instead, there's risk that they would drop us? They're not under contract with us?
I'm not necessarily worried about moving it to Friday. What I'm saying is if this gets delayed, again, they are waiting for this work. They are staffed up for this work. If we don't provide them this work, they would have sufficient grounds to seek other work.
Okay, fair. So you feel like Friday is still sufficient?
I believe we could, I don't believe that's going to affect our contracts. My point being on that issue is that by Friday, I don't believe we're going to have a full legal review of it. And so it kind of doesn't really pose, by Friday to have staff review all of the comments, consult with legal. Our outside consultant, I believe, is in trial, so I'm not even sure he could assist on that. So as a result, I don't know what we can give you on Friday that we can't give you today. If you would like us to do a full review, we are asking for the 2 weeks. And again, then we're pushing it out, and I'd have concerns regarding continuing it too far out.
Margaret, when the final theoretically comes back to the board, will Derek be able to be available for that board meeting to answer questions, and if there are requested changes to be made at that time, help draft those wordings?
He will not. He'll be in trial all next month, so it will not. But I'll have an opportunity to talk with him beforehand, and we can make sure that we're present. If you would like him to attend, it would be November that he would be back.
Okay, thank you.
I feel really frustrated right now because I feel like in April I said I'm really, really worried that we're going to see something, timely like August, September, and then when we couldn't, we see it now. And now I just feel like there's no safe way to proceed, and I'm looking for safety. And so I feel like there's no good answer. What would it be that I want to look into that would be so drastic that it has to be changed in such a way that it couldn't be done in time if we did just want those few extra days? There's something that you know that I don't know. When you use the phrase, when you say legal has to review this, how could I ask for so many changes, or could I, that would be so encumbering that it would change it so drastically to become that problem?
So I have no idea. I understand we received some comments this morning. I have not even opened those yet because I've been in board meetings, so I don't even know what they're requesting us to review. I would assume there would be a request for us to review all comments that came in today during oral presentation and written. There was quite a few that came in during oral, so I'm sort of go back taking very good notes, and I think we're going to want to go through everything and make sure they're accurate and have a response to all of those. So again, I don't know what there is, but we, from a legal perspective, don't like to do it on the fly. We want to make sure when we present it to the board, we have ample opportunity to review everything and consult with those we need to. So by Friday, I highly doubt we would have anything to give you. If you need more time just for your consideration, of course, that's your pleasure. I'm not commenting on that.
Sure, okay, thank you. So I guess what you're expressing from a legal standpoint, I'm expressing from a comfort standpoint. You want that time to review, and I want that time as well.
Well, before we, is it possible to have the meeting Thursday or Friday? And just logistically, let's talk about if we delayed it, can it even be done? So I know legally it can be done. Kim's saying no. Is that because Kim doesn't want to, or because Kim?
No, it's because Kim's out on Friday. Richard's not going to be here on Friday. I mean, we can always call in, but
I'm not going to be here on Friday.
Well, that's why I was saying
that logistically Friday doesn't work. I don't think. I mean, it's like, to me, the only day I could do it if we were going to do it this week would be if we did it at 8 a.m. before our ad hoc meeting on Thursday.
Right.
I mean, my calendar's full at this point. You can't.
That's why I threw out Thursday. We could sneak in. We could do it at 9 and ad hoc and at 11. But I don't know what Richard and the gang. Richard might be in Mexico by then.
Probably on my way, yeah.
So to me, I think that one of the better ideas would be, and we heard this in public comment, is if we vote and accept this as we got it today, and then set a date certain when we're going to revisit this. See if there's any changes that we have to make, and we could notice that today by setting that date, and people could start commenting now. So if we said, okay, we're going to pass this today, and on November 16th we're going to revisit this. That would give people plenty of time to read it, make comment, and then if there were things that needed to be changed, staff would have an opportunity to look at them, legal would have an opportunity to look at them, and we would have an opportunity to change it when we get there.
So I'm confused as to what exactly we're saying then. If you adopt it today, and you are saying in 2 weeks I may change it again, then what exactly have you adopted?
We're adopting a way to move forward. I mean, we're not creating law. We're creating a route for staff to use to move forward. We're not changing anything in the cannabis ordinance. We're not changing anything in the EIR. We're not changing anything in county code. All we're doing is saying this is how we're going to get from point A to point B. So at this point, I don't think there's really anything that is that concerning. The biggest issue we're going to run into is wordiness, or something that one of our cannabis consultants will probably have more issue with it than anyone else when they find out that, oh, we have to jump through the same hoop twice because of how staff's doing this. I think that on the grander scale, that we're not going to see a lot of changes required. I don't think it's going to be something that affects life as we know it. This document's not, it's not as important as people are thinking it is right now. I don't think it's not changing anything. So I don't see it. I'm not let's pass it so we can find out what's in it guy. But I think that I'm secure enough in the 3 days I had to review it to know that it's not going to be a world-changing document. And if we do need to change it in the future, I'm fine with that. But I don't think it's going to be, there's going to be any issues that can't be resolved.
Okay, well, I would like if it did come back in the 2 weeks. Just for the record, I will still have to say that I can't put a stamp, my stamp of approval on it today, but there's plenty of you to do so without that. And so, yeah, I would like it to be revisited if we could, please.
Chair Brown, may I make a few comments?
Yeah, please.
Can't see you. Yes, I concur with Jill. I would really like to bring it back in 2 weeks. That will be my final board meeting. And I got some really good, got a little bash today, and it's understandable. We knew it not my best work as far as a product, but it does stand and create a process that is needed to get started on. Inspections came up. Inspections are part of the process. You know, just adding that in, connecting some dots, cleaning some things up. Also having an ad hoc meeting to discuss process would be extremely helpful. That was changed up at the last minute. It's imperfect. It needs some fleshing out, and to have 1 or 2 ad hoc meetings to get that straightened out and review the comments received would be tremendously helpful. I think we could have something good for you in 2 weeks.
Director, are you suggesting that the draft come back in 2 weeks, or that a final will come back in 2 weeks?
Yeah, let me clarify that. Yes, I recommend approval today and coming back with changes in 2 weeks.
Oh, thank you. Any other
I
discussion?
think I would motion to accept that.
You have to be a little bit more specific.
I would motion to accept that we pass the transition plan today, and in 2 weeks come back and make any pertinent changes that need to be made through meetings with the ad hoc or legal for Trinity County.
I'll second that.
I would offer a subsequent to separate those two into 2 different motions. If we could motion to, and that's tough because then I'm in this position of trying to make a motion that's going to be upside down. I would like to vote on those separately. Margaret, can you give guidance as to how that happens at this juncture when there's a motion on the table?
You would have to make a subsequent motion. Actually, frankly, you'd have to make, no, you can't. They have to be voted on together unless you phrase it. It's a one item, so if you would like to do a subsequent motion, you can phrase it however you want, but it's all going to get voted on at the same time.
Ouch.
Just, if you wouldn't mind telling me exactly what you want, I can see if I can help.
Yeah, just on the record, I want to vote no to accept this today. And I want to vote yes to accept that it comes back in 2 weeks.
Okay,
But they're one motion right now, and I just would like them
so
separated.
you can do a motion to deny, but to bring it back in 2 weeks.
And that's my pain, because I don't want to put the word deny out there. I don't want it to sound negative. I'm just not comfortable accepting it today, but that's what I have.
Supervisor Cox, I would suggest that you take the next weeks to meet with your constituents and the people that have expressed their concerns, and that gives you 2 weeks to formulate the specific changes and your concerns in the document as they're written, and come up with an actual replacement of language that you feel more comfortable with.
Right, I have no problem with that. That's exactly the plan and the intent. It's just today's motion that I'm struggling with.
Okay.
Yeah. No, all good.
Okay.
So yeah, I guess in order to make that happen, I have to make a motion to deny the document.
You can say not accept.
Okay, I like it. Offer a subsequent motion on the table, please, to not accept the document as presented today.
And still bring it back in 2 weeks?
Well, and that's a separate.
Okay.
Yeah, you can do it under one motion.
Awesome, and still bring it back in 2 weeks. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, your motion failed.
That's great. All good.
Emma, can you pull the board, please?
So the motion is to adopt the transition plan and resolution as presented and revisit this item on the November 2nd board meeting. The motion was made by Supervisor Gokin. Do I have that accurately reflected?
Yeah, do we want to put the caveats in with the ad hoc and, or no?
No.
No, okay, yes.
Thank you. Second by Supervisor Brown. Supervisor Brown, how do you vote?
One moment, we'll do the subsequent first.
Oh, it failed. Your motion was second. Thank you.
Susie, you're wrong.
Thank you.
You got an eye from me.
Thank you. Supervisor Gogan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Grubbs?
I'm sorry, Jill, I Well, never mind, it's no comment.
Supervisor Cox, how do you vote?
No.
Supervisor Frazier? It passes 4-1. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That concludes the open session. We're going to be going into closed session. Item 4.1, Government Code Section 54954.5E, Public Employee Appointment, Director of Planning and Building. No fiscal impact. Is there any public comment on this item?
I see none within the room. No hands raised and no new chats.
Are we done?
All right, thank you all for your participation today.
Thank you, everyone.
Close the session. So can we all go ahead and turn a motion, Pete?